Go. All right, and welcome back to Hat Trick Sports Talk. We're doing shows a little bit earlier this week due to 4th of July weekend coming up, giving ourselves some good and well-needed time off. But I'm here, of course, with Cole Hinkel. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, other than a little bit of allergies. I think from my dog, I'm a little bit stuffed up today, but other than that, I'm doing great.
I just asked you, like, I have no clue how. I'm only like allergic to like codeine, so I don't have that many allergies, so I don't even know how that would work like in your house. But I guess the dog would make the most sense.
Yeah, a little stuffy, but took a little Claritin, and I think I'm going to be good here in a little bit. I just
Yeah.
need to get through this first phase.
Yeah, for sure. I think you'll be fine. You sound good to me, so we should be good. All right, so this was pretty much your idea. But as we're getting closer to the 2020s and us actually, well, we're already in the 2020s, but restarting sports again, we wanted to look back and take more of a deep dive on the 2010s, just a little bit something different from what you guys are used to. We did talk about the 2010s, or at least I did, on one of the shows I did by myself a few months ago as we started the 2020s, but just talking about some of the moments, and I'm sure we'll get to a few on that list that I showed from USA Today. In these lists as well, where we're going to do athletes, we're going to do moments, we're going to do Mount Rushmore, we're going to do some video games as well, which I found really bizarre. But we'll go through all of those, and we are starting with the best teams. And this is all your list, Call. So we're just going to sort of analyze it and go through all these
Yeah.
teams. And the first one I have a gripe with. Immediately I was like, I can't believe you even put this team on this list.
I knew I was going to get some hate for this one. Again, like you said, this is my personal opinion, so I'm sure a lot of our viewers or you are going to have a problem with some of these teams or players on the list. Uh,
This is partially why I'm here. This is kind of my moderator role again. Just going through and saying what I like or don't like about the list. At 10, we got the 2018 Boston Red Sox. Now, let me let me let me say my piece here before I let you go. Here's my thing. Yes, I get why they're on this list. I understand it in the sense that I remember in 2018 when they won, they're probably, let's say, let me be safe and say maybe top 10, top 15 baseball teams of all time. I
I
mean, I
think
remember after this World Series, they were like, "Oh my God, this is an amazingly built team." Whatever. Of course, 108 wins. But again, Alex Correa was the head coach. There are some cheating scandals and all that stuff here. So I don't think it's fair to put them on this list because it also showcases the issues with baseball and is this team really legitimate? And that's why I don't think they deserve to be on this list. In fact, I rather put the Cubs from 2016 on this list, who are more historically focused in baseball in the sense that they finally won that title after over 100 years. I think that would make more sense here at 10 than this Boston Red Sox team for those reasons.
yeah,
Why did you even put them on this list?
I mean that's fair. I think the Cubs are more of a historic team as far as clinching a championship, as far as like superstitious wise and stuff. It's more a little bit more of a celebration. I put this team here just because of the dominance. Like you said, I think easily this is a top 10 uh, baseball team in history. That being said, I understand coming out now there's a little bit of cheating allegations and stuff like that. But I don't know that this team was, and this is all speculation, of course, but I don't know that this team was in fact cheating to the degree of the Houston Astros. Now, whether that's good or bad that they're cheating at all, that's a little bit fuzzy. But to me, just the overall dominance, and I think when you look at this team, when you look at their batting lineup from top to bottom is stacked, and pitching staff, Chris Sale, David Price, you had Craig Kimbrell coming out of the pen. Like this team is one of the most stacked teams I think we've ever seen. So putting some of those maybe minor red flags to me away, I still think this team is really dominant. Like regardless of what may or may not have transpired from a cheating standpoint.
I think that I think just for the cheating alone, you can't put them on this list. I don't think you have merits to do that because we don't even know. how dominant this team would have been if it didn't cheat. Yes, it probably would have still been as dominant. I don't know if it would have won. Of course, Yankees fans and Dodger fans are pretty pissed off that they're even on this list, but uh, I don't think it's fair. I don't think if you're looking at a top 10 list, you put a team that is in some way synonymous with cheating there. I just don't agree with it, and I don't think it's fair. I'd rather put the Cubs partially because of the story, and of course, it's probably one of the best rated World Series ever, that World Series between the Indians and the Cubs. So just from a historical standpoint, that would make more sense here at 10 for me.
Yeah, I think you make a fair point. To me, this category was more about, uh, the overall shape of the roster rather
Uh-huh.
than, I mentioned those 2016 Cubs later on, so
Yeah.
a little sneak peek there, but
Yeah. At number 9, we got the Kentucky Wildcats. I wrote an article about this team. This is one of the first articles I've ever written talking about comparing this team's losses, the 2 losses, to like those dream team losses back when they played these college teams and all that stuff, and how it kind of helped them end up winning the title because everyone was worried about them being undefeated. I think it was better that they had those 2 losses on their record just to realize that they can lose. But this Kentucky Wildcats team is just filled with NBA players and, of course, one NBA star in Anthony Davis.
yeah, definitely. I think this is, as I mentioned in this kind of like little bullet points I put in there, I think this is the first time that you saw that a team built around freshman superstars could win a national title. Anthony Davis being the main part of that, but you also had Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who played a really good role on this team. This also kind of shaped later on for Coach Cal, like that. I think it was 2 years later. I think it was 2014 where they got Devin Booker and like that superstar loaded freshman class. So I think this kind of shaped the culture of Kentucky basketball as far as recruiting goes, and as far as showing guys that you can come here. This kind of solidified the one and done type of thing. Also, like you said, I think them losing a game was beneficial to them winning the national title. We saw with that later on that Devin Booker led Kentucky basketball team. They didn't lose a game until the Final Four. So I think
Yeah. To Wisconsin, right? Yeah, I remember
yeah.
that.
So there's something to do with, like you said, getting that loss kind of out of the way and kind of being able to just focus on winning the whole thing rather than keeping a perfect record.
It is one of these teams that changed the one and done, I think, and made more programs focus on the one and done era. Was this team for you one of those kind of starting points for college basketball as a whole to look at one and done as a feasible option and maybe now the only option to winning a national title, or one of the only ones?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I had mentioned, I think this shaped the program for Kentucky, but I also think, like you said, this made sense for everyone looking forward, that you can come in, win a title in your first year, and be able to move to the NBA and start to make your money. I think this was kind of that breaking point, whether that's good or not for college basketball. I'm a little bit opposed to it. I like to see the guys stay, but
No,
also
I think everyone is. The era back in the day was way better in terms of having guys stay 3 years or so.
yeah, you can have a little bit better of a talent pool when guys can stay and kind of develop, but I also understand it from the standpoint that some of these guys, want or need to make the money, but also, looking forward to progressing their NBA careers. So,
This draft class, too, the year after, of course, Anthony Davis goes 1 to the eventual Pelicans, Hornets at the time, and then let's see, and then Kid Gilchrist goes to the Charlotte Bobcats at the time. Kid Gilchrist really wasn't ready.
yeah,
And then after him, of course, was Bradley Beal. So it kind of overvalued at least Kid Gilchrist's stock a little bit too high at that time. But I'm not sure how else you could have based it on because pretty much everyone had them going 1 and 2 in that draft.
yeah, definitely. I think this is another scenario where we value winning, and them winning the national title probably boost him in that conversation. Not to take away from anything that he accomplished that year, but being on that star-studded team next to Anthony Davis and them winning the national title, I think definitely boosted his stock. And like you said, I just think he was not ready for that type of role.
And then at 8, this is probably the one team that kind of started my sort of enjoyment with baseball. is this dynasty, the Giants dynasty. I basically started watching the World Series pretty heavily and pretty much the postseason as a whole during this dynasty. What makes this dynasty special for you? Of course, you have guys like Tim Lincecum, Hunter Pence, for example. There were really some good personalities on this dynasty as well.
Yeah, really good personalities, but I think this is also this 2010 team in particular was probably, I mean, is more of a shock to baseball fans than anyone, just because when you look at the 2012, 2014, you had a dominant Madison Bumgarner on the mound. This 2010 team is where he's a little bit younger and he's still continuing to develop. They had Matt Cain, who was actually probably their ace in this, and like you said, they had a really solid uh, depth. They had Tim Lincecum, like I said, and then their batting lineup it's a little bit shocking because you look at it in 2010 and you think to yourself, who's really gonna hit for this team, and it was surprising because you had a young Buster Posey who you thought was gonna be the guy for this team, but he didn't actually lead the team in home runs or anything. So I think the biggest thing for this team was depth, like I keep mentioning, but to me, this overall run was probably the most exciting in sports for me in the last couple of years, just because of the every other year they were winning. It was really exciting. I know I followed this team towards the later ends of it when they played Kansas City and stuff like that. And you had walk-off home runs from Travis Ishikawa, and to get to the World Series. So this team was just overall really exciting to watch top to bottom. Later on you had guys like Pablo Sandoval, and of course, like you said, Tim Lincecum is from Washington. So that's a fun story to watch from our standpoint.
As here locally, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um, but it was also funny because the Giants nowadays even are always like, oh my God, even year, even year, even year. Like in the
yeah,
odd years, you're always just that's always something that sticks with me when you look at this 2010 team. Is it's always that even year thing that I
yeah.
feel like will forever be synonymous with the Giants.
Most definitely. I remember that year, the 2016 year. They weren't that good, but they snuck into the playoffs late. I think they were a wild card team, and everyone was like, "Well, it's an even year, so they're gonna find a way to, run through the playoffs and win a World Series." But this was a really exciting team to watch from top to bottom.
And then at number 7, you got the U.S. Women's National Team from 2019. Of course, we just watched them last year. This team was absolutely ridiculous. That 13-0 win against Thailand is obviously kind of shame for all the wacky and weird celebrating. I don't know why that was such a big story. That was literally a big story for the first 2 weeks of the tournament. Kind of overshadowed some of the amazing things they did in the group stage. This was a really fun World Cup overall, but this women's national team is one of the best ever.
Yeah, most definitely. I could have went with the previous World Cup team that won it the first time.
Yeah,
But I thought this team was more overall dominant. I thought they had a little bit more time to gel and be better. Like I put in the notes there, they only lost one game in all of 2019. So in a full circle year, they only lost one game, and that was the very first game they played, actually. So after that, they got on a little bit of a roll and really started to mow some teams down. But I also think there's something to be said for repeating as World Cup champions.
hmm
It's one thing to do it once, but I think when you can repeat, that really solidifies kind of your legacy.
yeah. This is a really fun. I don't think people realize how fun the Women's World Cup is. Like just watching it and watching all the matches is really fun. I at times feel like it's better than the men's in terms of just aesthetics. It's a much differently styled game, which is something that I really enjoy. But this team had so much young talent too, as well. Some of the older players have definitely over the next few years are moving on, but the depth of this women's national team is so much greater than the men's in terms of the amount of talent that keeps coming up the totem pole for them, like
Def-
Mallory Pugh, for example.
Definitely, I think this team has a lot of youth, like you said, and a lot of depth, which makes this team really exciting. I think that's what makes the United States rally around this team a lot more. Obviously, wins attribute to that, but there's something to be said for, I feel like men's U.S. soccer is not really followed. I think it's on the upward trend now because, like you said, we're starting to get some young stars like Christian Pulisic. But this team has, had players like Alex Morgan, Mallory Pugh, Sydney LaRue, when she
Mhm.
was younger. It had a lot of young talent that was fun to kind of watch grow up. And I think that's what made this team special and why we probably rallied around it. Like you said, some people find this more interesting, than men's soccer, especially, and I'm sure a lot of that attributes to wins. But
Mhm.
there is something to be said for the way that the United States seems to rally around this team every 4 years.
Yeah. And then at number 6, of course, locally, this was actually the NFL.com team of the decade. I think for good reason. Um, this team is weird, and here's why it's a weird team. Two reasons. One, this team was built not on first or second round picks. This team was built Russell Wilson in the third round, and Richard Sherman, for example, in the fifth round, and a bunch of undrafted guys. This team is just weirdly built, and amazingly, for at least the short period that these few teams existed with Sherman in this defense, it was just like a player centric environment. Pete Carroll kind of relished in that, and of course, it kind of led to the demise of this team at the end of the day. I mean, it's still amazing with Russell Wilson, but it's not the same as this time. But also, it was strange. And do you remember the drafts the years after this? The 2 years after this draft, 2014 and 2015, the amount of teams that focused on drafting secondary was just ridiculous. I mean, obviously, it's always based on the team that wins and like how did they win and how did they be successful. But to be honest, secondaries are not usually the way you find a way to win a title, and they found a way to do it, and it kind of changed the league or at least the draft in a major way the 2 years following.
Yeah, definitely. I think some outside the box thinking started to happen after this. I mean, even now we see emphasis from top organizations like the Patriots are now starting to focus on secondary first and stuff. You know what I mean? So there's still some outside the box thinking as far as, how can we improve our team that not everyone else is doing. Like you said, it's a copycat league. The years following this Seattle Seahawks team, a lot of people did try and emulate this sort of secondary first um, plan. Um, but just to touch more on this team, I think the most, like you said, the craziest part of the whole thing is you're doing it with guys who weren't drafted high. You know what I mean? Like you said, you see people start to take secondary picks high and stuff. I think the succession rate on that is probably pretty low. I think
Yeah.
you're gonna find one every once in a while, but I don't know that you're gonna be able to hit like that on every top draft pick. So I think that's what makes this team interesting is because, like you said, a lot of late round draft picks, a lot of undrafted guys chipping in and stuff like that. But the biggest thing to me was the way this team was able to limit, but also like in my stats here, they had the most takeaways, which is when you lead the league in points allowed, yards allowed, and takeaways, and you're the only team since arguably the best defense ever, the '85 Bears.
No, they are the best defense ever. It's
That
it's inarguable.
that's a stat that you can't really argue with.
And I think this Seahawks team, and also speaking of the Broncos, that Broncos team, Peyton Manning's final year, we got really lucky with some incredible defenses that, especially with that Broncos team, I don't think we appreciated as much as this team, but they're in that category of the 85 Bears. I still put the 85 Bears at number one, but those two defenses in particular, with the Seahawks and Peyton Manning's final year, our final year of his career in Denver, like those two defenses are just incredible, and we got really lucky to watch them play.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, coming from a Niners fan, with my flag here on the back wall, it's not exactly something I love talking about. But this Seahawks team is, you're probably right at top two, right behind the Bears as far as all time defenses go. Um, but yeah,
Uh,
not something I necessarily
This is
love
why they're at 6.
admitting.
This is
Yeah,
exactly why
this is
they're at
why they're at
6.
6. Yeah.
But I think that also let's talk about Pete Carroll too. I did want to talk about his run, of course, coming in 2009. They get to the playoffs with a 7-9 record. Of course, the beast mode run beat the Saints, who won the championship the year before. But he just built a culture there that was so impressive. And then once Russell Wilson got there, you just felt something different with that team the year before. You were like, okay, this team's got something here, and they'll find a way to get a Super Bowl at some point.
Yeah, I think what Pete Carroll does the best is I think he really tries to emulate or implement, I should say, that competitive nature that I think sports really needs. He's always made sure that there's it's whoever's going to play the hardest. It has nothing to do with money, draft stock or whatever. Like you said, when Russell Wilson came in, Matt Flynn just got paid big by the Seahawks to come in and be the quarterback, but you know a lot of coaches probably would have got a lot of flack for bringing in a guy who you drafted in the third round and having him start right away, especially after you pay a guy like Matt Flynn that type of money to come in. But he's always put the emphasis on competition, and I think that's what separates him as far as building his program. And like you said, he's always put the players first, which is probably why they get a lot of guys to come here and say that they want to play here, because I think it's something to be said for letting the players kind of control how they practice and stuff, rather than a system like Bill Belichick, where you're still going to win, but it's probably
Team
not as
culture.
we've seen guys say it's not as fun to play in. So
Right. And then again, as I said, this is probably going to piss people off, but I don't think people realize how great this Barcelona team was in 2010, 2011. Talk about this team in particular, because I'm sure not a lot of American fans really understand why this team was so special.
yeah, I mean, people can be mad all they want really at this one for me, because this is the team globally that kind of shaped soccer. I mean, even for American, an American soccer player like me growing up, I have posters of this team on my wall. This is the team that kind of took soccer to that next level, especially globally, with the style that they played, especially. They win games, and they won Champions League games, and you had coaches after the game saying stuff like, it's beautiful to watch the way that these guys play soccer. I mean, and that's coming from a losing coach. It's just when you watch this team and the possession that they had on the ball and the star talent they had around, it was something where it was just something I can't really put into words as far as the soccer fans go, as far as the soccer fan goes, just because of the fact that like this team would control possession, like I said, for like 90 to 10%. Like the other team wouldn't even be able to touch the ball. It was just something that, as a soccer fan to watch, there's nothing that I don't think any team even comes close to comparing to this type of team. And this is really the first time that you hear or start hearing about, guys like Leo Messi and David Villa. I mean, they've always been on a global scale, somewhat bigger. But when you put these guys together, this is sort of that kind of coming of youth for these guys.
Now, speak on that change with soccer, like or I guess football as a whole. Like, what changed after this year in terms of the style of player, things like that? Like, what really changed for you? Why was this a stepping stone at the beginning of the 2010s for soccer/football as a whole?
Yeah, I think this Messi becoming uh, the star player that he was becoming. I think now you start to get into the debates of greatest of all time. Obviously, Cristiano comes into that conversation. But this as a whole, I think, focused on, building a team rather than stars, because we've seen stars in the past, Ronaldinho, Henry, all these type of guys. So this to me, though, like I said, was the shift of soccer moving towards a kind of a group of guys coming together. This Barcelona team, like I said, mentioned here, Messi, David Villa, Piqué, Iniesta, Xavi. You had the right pieces in the right places, but like I said, this team to me more shifted towards the control of the soccer game, not just trying to score goals or something like that, but having control of the complete game and having it in your hands basically the whole time.
All right, and then number 4. This is my favorite basketball team of all time. This team in the 2013 team. I love this Miami team. I was one of the few, probably one of the 5% of people outside of Miami that really enjoyed this team. But honestly, it was so fun to watch. LeBron really becoming the star that he is now, and the big shot that he is the best player in the league. I don't remember many people saying when he was in Cleveland, like, this is the best player in the league. When he came to Miami, he was in his prime, and it showed. I mean, to have a great player like him in his prime with Wade and Bosch next to him, I mean, he was just the greatest player of all time, starting from this period on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make. I think once he got there, and like me and you have talked about, once he was able to establish kind of that winning culture that I think he needed to experience to be able to take, back to Cleveland later on and stuff like that. I think this is when he starts to become the greatest player of all time. Um, but this
Or
team,
one of the greatest. I don't know how people would say with MJ, but yeah.
yeah. Um, but this team as a whole, like we have also touched on, I think this is kind of the coming together of the AAU type of setting where these guys are friends and they want to come to play together. But this team was dominant. Like I said, like I mentioned before with the U.S. Women's National Team, I think there's something to be said for winning your first one, but to be able to repeat, I think is huge, especially with the pressure that's on you in the longer, season in basketball before when you're playing, longer into playoffs and then the next year you're back there again. There's something to be said for that. And then obviously their 27 consecutive game wins is second most all time. So that's a stat in itself. But like you said, I think this team was more well rounded than they have been in years past. Ray Allen being a huge piece off the bench obviously with that game 6 shot. So this team had a little bit more depth than I think previous years, but I also think, like you said, these guys are starting to gel. LeBron's starting to become the superstar that we all imagined him to be. Not that he wasn't before, but like you said, I think his maturity and his growth as a player started to flourish in this year. And Bosch, I think this year finally accepted the role that he was, kind of put in to be in.
Hmm. I think Bosch is not going to be remembered as much as he should, unfortunately. I mean, everyone talks about Wade and LeBron, but let's not forget Bosch played a tremendous impact at the center role, as we talked about in the rewatchables over the weekend. Like, him in that center role was so key for them, that small ball. But Spo, I mean, that off season was insane. I mean, I think they did some Army-based stuff. I mean, they were committed in those years following that Mavericks loss in the NBA Finals. I think that they just came in more committed and said, like, hey, we got to get this done. We got to prove the doubters wrong. And they started ignoring basically all the haters compared to the first year and saying, like, all right, we got this. Let's show the world that we can do this.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think there's some pressure to be said when at your press conference you're saying we're going to win 7 championships.
Oh, God.
So, I mean, this was, like you said, I think this was more or less just focusing on what you can get done rather than, listening to all the outside noise.
Yeah. And then, of course, the New England Patriots dynasty would be in here, 2014. I mean, this dynasty is. I understand all the cheating stuff. I get it, but this Patriots team, I'm sorry, they were fun to watch. I don't think people realize how fun this Patriots team is to watch. And now that the Brady era is over, it definitely is going to feel weird. Because to be honest, this dynasty, whether you'll admit it or not, they were fun to watch, and they had a style that was so amazing with Belichick and Brady.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is arguably the most dominant team on this list as far as longevity and stuff goes. Um, but like you said, with Brady gone, I think people are going to kind of miss the hatred that they gave this team. I think there's something to be said, like we've mentioned before, of rooting against the team. I think people are going to kind of miss that a little bit in a weird kind of way. But this 2014 team to me was the better out of all of them. I mean, arguably you could make the case for the 2017 when they beat the Atlanta Falcons, the comeback in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But I think outside of that win, this team is better overall. I think Gronk is a little bit more efficient. You had Darrelle Revis, who was a nice piece for Belichick in these years. And then I mean, I don't mean to rub it in, but you had
No,
the
you don't have to rub it in. I don't
you had
care.
the drama. You had the drama of the Super Bowl with the last play. So I mean,
Yeah.
this makes this team exciting also. But I think people forget how dominant this offense was. Like you said, with Brady, this is probably the year that they opened it up a little bit more on offense, and this offense was really dominant to go along with a solid defense. But this is really the Brady that I think the most efficient Brady that we saw as far as pass game goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think even early in the 2010s, this team is basically a dynasty, and really throughout the decade, they show themselves as in a league where dynasties don't make sense. Like, how do you create a dynasty with the way the draft is set up, the way free agency is set up, in a league where it's not like the NBA where you can team up and stuff. You got 11 guys on the field, and obviously a quarterback like Brady helps that. But this is so bizarre. Like, I don't think you'll ever see a dynasty like this ever again. Maybe dynasties are going to be 2-3 years, but not a decade long or more. You're just not going to see it because the NFL is just not built for that. And for some amazing reason, when Belichick found Brady, they kind of figured it out and built just a really amazing program.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're probably never going to see a team like this in the NFL again, just because, like you said, it's really hard to get this type of thing going and keep it going for this long. Um, but the only reason this team isn't higher on this list is because of the fact that I think it is a dynasty, and I was just looking at solid one seasons. That's why I have the next two teams where they do. But yeah, for overall longevity and dynasty as far as it goes, I think this is arguably the best.
And then at number 2, you got the Clemson Tigers from 2018. In particular, of course, Trevor Lawrence. But I think one of the big points you bring up here is that Dabo builds a full program. Like, they are building a dynasty now. And I know that Alabama was there for pretty much all of the 2010s, but they started something towards the end of the decade where it was like, okay, Dabo's got a guy in Trevor Lawrence, and now he can build around him and build a dynasty next to Alabama, and at times better than Alabama, especially in 2018.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is finally him establishing that. I think this is actually them moving past Alabama as far as program wise goes. Um, a lot of people will forget this started with Deshaun Watson.
Oh, that's true,
The
of
sort
course.
of trend towards this type of program. But I think the passing point for them was getting Trevor Lawrence to lead them to this perfect record this season and beat Alabama in the championship. So I think this was the passing of the guard. Um, but we never thought of Clemson as this type of program before Dabo came. That's why to me this is really the full program when you can recruit on the level that Dabo has done. And let's be fair, Dabo is a really good recruiter and a really good coach. I think that I don't think there's anyone that will doubt that, but there's something to be said for a guy that can build a program like he's said multiple times from the little school, Clemson, compared to a giant like Alabama. It's not often that we see a smaller type of school like this get built up into the program that he's built it. So for me, the perfect record, a freshman quarterback, going up against Nick Saban in a championship. We all know how difficult Nick Saban-led defenses are. But to have a freshman do it, not to take away from Trevor Lawrence's talent, but we all know how Nick Saban can scheme things up. So I think that's something to be said. But just the overall culture, like you said, that Dabo has brought to this school and this football team.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama for as long as they did it. I mean, to see Clemson and Alabama kind of have this 1-2 punch. Yeah, it kind of dilutes college football a little bit. Let's be honest, but it is amazing to watch these two go head to head pretty much year after year in the national championship, especially in this college football playoff era.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are the two teams that every year we write in the final. So
Yeah. And then the Warriors, of course, they were going to be number 1 on this list with Durant. What is your sort of thought process now looking back at the Durant Warriors era? Is it? I mean, it's not beautiful, it's not perfect, but it was incredible to watch.
yeah, obviously you'd like to see a little bit different end if you're a Warriors fan. But I think you already had a dynasty in place, and you add at this time, to me personally, the best player in the world. Obviously, the most gifted scorer, but I think what he brought defensively to that team also needs to be mentioned. And then them kind of implementing this real not traditional, I should say, but like new wave of small ball with this death lineup. Also has something to be said for today's NBA. I think this is kind of probably where teams like the Rockets nowadays get this type of ideas from this type of lineup. They don't have a 7-footer like Durant, but it's the same type of system. But like you said, speaking back, on the Warriors part of things, I just think it was video game like to be able to pair Durant with the team that they already had in place, and it just made it so it was stupid. It was arguably you know it is the most dominant team in sports ever, I think, just because
Yeah.
of the talent and the chemistry that these guys had. And I don't want to sell them short of their defensive prowess too. I think this team was really good defensively, and that's something people will always forget just because of the offensive output they had. But this team defensively was also really solid.
Let's talk about Steve Kerr for a second. I don't think he had enough appreciation for what he did with this team. I mean, he always felt like he was on the back burner, almost like anyone can coach this team. No, Steve Kerr knew the best way to run this team. Obviously, being a three-ball guy himself, he knew how to kind of really capture the three-ball era, especially with these teams. I don't think any other coach could have coached them as well as Steve Kerr did.
Yeah, I think handling the personalities, obviously we saw a few rocky bumps in the road, but I think handling the personalities, I think the biggest thing for him was being a part of those Chicago Bulls teams for so many years. He learned how to be around, star-studded players and how to manage this type of media attention that they were getting and stuff like that. To be able to manage it on a day in day out basis is pretty remarkable, especially like I said, when you take in account into like egos and stuff like that. So Steve Kerr probably, you're right, will never get mentioned. But I don't want to take away from these guys. I agree with you. I think Steve Kerr was the right guy, but I think there's a few, reasons why it was probably pretty easy to coach this team at sometimes. You can get up by 20 in a hurry and you can kind of coast the rest of the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Steve Kerr was the right man for the job.
And then speaking on the 73 win team, I mean, why do you think they're not on this list for you? I mean, obviously Durant makes them better, but why would you not put the 73 win team on this list? Of course, in terms of record, a legendary team, even though they didn't find a way to win the title. Is that pretty much it for you? Why they aren't on this list?
Yeah, I mean, they don't win the title, but I just, like you said, adding a piece like Kevin Durant, who, like I said, to me is the best player in the world at this time, it's the talent you just can't argue with. And then, like I put in the notes also here, when you go 15-0 to start, you only lose one game in the finals. Um, you're dominating in the playoffs. You know what I mean? You're really dominating every team that you're playing. This team is not short also that far off as far as regular season wins.
Hmm.
So just, them probably looking back on that season and thinking, well, we can lose a few games as long as we win the national title,
Okay.
like you said.
All right, we're moving on to top 10 athletes now. At 10 is Sidney Crosby. Now, in terms of hockey, of course, not as popular here in the States. And unfortunately, part of the reason is that the star power just isn't as promoted as always. But Crosby and Ovechkin are guys that are just synonymous here and in Canada in terms of guys that really ran the NHL for this decade.
Yeah, I had to give some hockey love on this pod. I know there's probably not a lot of people that follow hockey or anything, but Sidney Crosby to me, rather than Ovechkin, is kind of the guy that I think that this is the guy that they can kind of market hockey for. He's a good personality, a really good guy, but also I think this is probably the name that gets mentioned in the most with guys like Wayne Gretzky. I think Ovechkin probably has a little bit more around him. Not to take away from Ovechkin, but Ovechkin never really won until this. When did they win the Stanley
Two
Cup? A
years
couple
ago,
years ago?
basically.
Yeah, 2 years ago. So I mean, Crosby to me is the guy that comes up. He also plays for the Penguins, which is a little bit more of a historic franchise, so there's a little bit more media presence there. So I just think the way he handles himself and he's been synonymous with winning in hockey. So that's why I put him here. It's probably a little bit of a reach. But like I said, I wanted to give some hockey love because this is probably the only chance I'm going to be able to get.
Well, we'll talk some over the playoffs too, and you give some gymnastics love, of course, down the list, which we'll get to. But Novak Djokovic at 9, I don't believe Federer or Nadal are even on this list in the big three. Talk about why Djokovic is here at 9.
Yeah, Djokovic to me, I was looking over stats and stuff. I just think Roger and
Nadal.
Nadal, yeah, were a little bit more dominant earlier on, but I think after 2011 is when Djokovic kind of took over. Some of those other guys are aging, obviously. I think Djokovic is going to be able to, I mean, minus his back problems, he's kind of carrying out a little bit better. Um, but just overall titles and stuff, he holds a couple more in the last few years, which is why to me I put him here rather than some of those other guys, because later on he's seeming to carry out a little bit better.
In some remarkable matches, mind you. His
Yeah,
matches are, I mean, last year in Wimbledon, I covered it. That match was remarkable. I mean, he's had some crazy matches, of course, Nadal and Federer as well, even with those two against each other. But I mean, the big three in tennis, I mean, it's amazing that it's still going on pretty strong.
yeah.
Of course, the bottom half, other than those top three, aren't as well known and aren't as amazing, as we'll get to the women's divisions a little bit later. But I mean, the big three in tennis is just like everyone knows them, everyone knows how great they are, and they're really special to watch too.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of wanted to get your input because I know you're even a little more well versed in tennis than I. Do you agree with the fact that Djokovic has been a little bit more dominant later on, rather than
Yeah,
if we were doing a full like 2000s list? Then
right.
what? How do you rank them as far as you know? I probably put Federer over Nadal. I know some people
So,
differ on that, but
so Nadal's a clay guy, basically, right? I mean, even with his back problems, I think, what was it, 2016, 2017, he found a way to win the French Open, even when his back wasn't perfect. Nadal's a clay guy. I think Federer is a little bit more of a grass guy, but in general, I put Federer, Nadal, and then Djokovic last, just as a whole. But that can really be debated. But nothing can be debated that in terms of the eras of tennis, this era was run by these three, and it's probably going to continue to be run by these three at least for the next 3 years.
mhm.
And then Messi at eight. Messi at eight and Ronaldo at six. Let's kind of jumble them together. Why would you put Ronaldo over Messi here?
So again, this is my list, obviously, and this is more of a personal preference. And it is with throughout all soccer fans worldwide. I think it is more of a personal preference. I think majority of people would put Messi above, but I value winning a little bit more than rather than like individual stats per se. And I just think with Messi, he's never won any major titles outside of club soccer. So I think it's a little bit hard for me to put Messi in there. I just feel like Messi individually is really great, but he never can seem come time for World Cup or Copa America or anything, really get that Argentinian team together and kind of lead it that way. Um, Cristiano is also a little bit more of a personality for me, which is a little bit more exciting to watch. From a media standpoint, he's a little bit more fun to cover, I think. So it's more or less of a personal preference between those two, but
I think you bring up a really interesting point. Now, I'm a Messi guy personally, but I feel for Messi so much in the sense that I remember Copa America Centenario. I remember that penalty kick. It's, I mean, Ronaldo's got the Euro over him. Obviously, they don't got World Cups, but it is that international. If you're going to look at the totality of their careers, it is the international piece that I think edges him out. Whether the personal preference matters or not, I think it's the international piece that edges him out. But you have to feel for Messi because Argentina, let's be honest, the talent, especially for that Copa America Centenario year, just wasn't there. It was kind of messy and just a bunch of veterans, and it kind of showed in that final. Obviously, that final against Chile was a huge mess with a bunch of red cards and just terrible refereeing. But as a whole, it is difficult for Messi, knowing that he probably should have won, particularly that title, and then Ronaldo getting that Euro.
yeah, like you said, for me, it's the international wins and Ronaldo winning that Euro against France. When I think no one was expecting that. Um, but that to me is what separates these two.
And there might be people who say as well that he didn't play all of those minutes, right? He was injured for a good portion of that game too, which does hurt him a little bit in terms of legacy, but it is fairly even regardless. So you can definitely go either way.
And then I also do want to touch on World Cup. um, impact. Obviously, this last World Cup, we saw Ronaldo kind of take over with those set pieces against Spain, and really put on a show. I just feel like Messi has never really been able on the bigger stage to be able to put on a show for the fans. And like I said, that's also something that I take into account here as far as personality wise goes. And like I said, I value Ronaldo's personality a little bit more than Messi. Not to take away from Messi as a person or whatever, or a player, but just from a media standpoint, it's a little bit more fun to cover a guy who's a little bit more outgoing.
Mm-hmm. And then Usain Bolt at 7. I mean, track and field is somewhat synonymous, as most Olympic sports are, in some way or another, with steroid scandals and things of that nature. And it definitely affected Bolt, with one of his teammates testing positive for steroids, which took one of his titles away, or one of his golds away. But in a sport that is somewhat steroid ridden, for him to never do steroids and for him to be just the fastest man in the world and just show out in a sport that's riddled with those kind of things, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, the dominance here for me. Obviously, we're not going to talk about track and field a whole lot, but I think always from this point on, when we talk about track and field, we're going to be talking about Usain Bolt. He's the first kind of, like I also said, personality wise, where it's someone that you can market. So for me, that played a big role in it. But like you touched on, the dominance, not using steroids that we know of, but not being in that conversation, I think, and being that dominant is something that you can't argue with.
How unique is it in the United States, especially with how NBC covers the Olympics? And it's very, I mean, they've even admitted it's very female centric. It's not, the marketing's a lot different because they market a lot of athletes. And personally, I love their coverage, but it is athlete centric instead of, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's athlete centric instead of event centric. But for NBC in particular, to be able to promote a Jamaican, and obviously they can do that for like hardcore track and field fans, but to promote a Jamaican track and field runner the way they do, and for you to want to watch in prime time Usain Bolt at like 10, 11 o'clock at night is amazing.
Yeah, I think like you said, that's probably the only way that they really can do it. I don't think that you're going to get a whole lot of viewership if you don't make it around the athlete. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But I think, um, like you said, to want to turn on the TV to watch, a sprinter is something in itself. It's pretty remarkable. But like you said, when they can market these guys as far as athletes goes, that's what makes it exciting for me as far as coverage wise.
Yeah. And then at 5, we continue with the Olympic trend with Simone Biles. I remember, what was it, 2015, when she was kind of first starting to come on the scene and everyone kind of hyped her up, and she lived up to it. I mean, that Rio 2016 gymnastic team is one of the most incredible teams ever. I mean, they were majestic to watch. They were so enjoyable to watch. I mean, Simone Biles, her floor routines, her bean routines are some of the best ever, in my opinion. I mean, she's probably going to end up at the end of her career, and she's lasted longer than most of these athletes in the gymnastic space. She's definitely going to end up probably as one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time in the sport.
Yeah, I agree. I think she probably will end up the greatest of all time, but I think you make it the point I was going to make was the longevity of it. Even now she's continuing on into a little bit, it's a lot longer of a career than we're used to seeing, but the dominance that she continues to have is also something to be said. She's probably the one person that when we, like I said, with Usain Bolt, when we talk about gymnastics, this is who we talk about, and like you said, that 2016 team with Michaela Maroney and a couple of those other,
Ali Raisman as well. Yeah.
yeah, a couple of those other gals. But for her to be the leader of that team, I think is really what makes it obviously put her on this list. But the dominance, like I have mentioned with a number of these people, the dominance that she displays, but also the longevity of it. Like you said, even into the later half of this decade, she's still continuing to be what we continue to talk about.
It's that she's able to sort of live up to that hype. I mean, there's always pressure on this gymnastics team. It's one of the funnest sports to watch during the Olympics, but the U.S. gymnastics team in particular, there's so much pressure on them to be successful and in the shorter of career span, and for that team as a whole to come together and actually find a way to win. Obviously, with the other stuff going on with NASCAR or NASCAR and all that stuff, for them to compete at that level with all that stress and difficulty is just amazing, and power to them.
Yeah, definitely a lot of outside noise, but like you said, just the continued focus.
Yeah. And then at number 4, we got Mike Trout. Now, obviously, no World Series for him, but Mike Trout's just a special player. What to you puts him at 4 on this list?
Yeah, just the I keep saying this word, but the dominance year in year out for Mike Trout. I mean, he's arguably got no one around him to kind of protect him in that lineup, but he continues to hit around 300 and however many home runs and play arguably the best center field of anyone in baseball. So for me, the last decade, this is the one guy MLB has failed to market, I will say, because this
Yeah.
is the one guy that, they have a huge star in a huge market in basically LA that they have failed to, really make a name for himself. But I also think he kind of he is the stereotypical baseball player when we think of him. I don't know that Mike Trout always wants to be in the spotlight, and that's to me what makes him special for MLB is because when you think about baseball, you think of it more as a team sport than an individual. And for a guy to come in year out and just focus on what he can do, um, he's never made waves as far as complaining, that he wants a trade or anything. But he's just year in, year out stays grounded and just keeps doing the same thing every year, which in baseball is so hard to do when you can average those type of stats every year for the past 10 years is remarkable.
Mike Trout, just as a whole, I mean, it's gonna be tough if he never wins a World Series, but we'll know in terms of his career, it's not just how great he'll be, but he is definitely the greatest baseball player of this generation. And then at 3 with Serena Williams, as you mentioned, I am a big tennis fan, but I've got into tennis the last 5 years, 5 6 years because of Serena and Venus and those matches. I mean, women's tennis now is amazing. It's better than the men's by a lot. I absolutely love it. It's shorter matches as well, but it's Serena, her serve is just ridiculous. I mean, even now in the later stages of her career, it's ridiculous. The longevity is just ridiculous. And the sport has changed tremendously. I mean, Serena and Venus were so dominant. Another sport now with women like Naomi Osaka, the sport is now becoming much more parity driven. So Serena has had some struggles even to find a way to get back to winning these championships. But even with that, how the era has changed since she came back from her pregnancy, and for her to come back from her pregnancy and be pregnant and win a title, like, oh my God, like it's ridiculous. She is amazing in so many aspects, and I don't think she's appreciated as much as she is, or as much as she should be, even though she's high on this list.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's hard for people to appreciate golf, and I just
Or
think,
tennis, yeah.
or yeah, excuse me, tennis. But like you said, her dominance. She has 23 single Grand Slam titles. So I mean, those type of numbers are ridiculous in itself. But just moving forward with tennis, I think she's really made kind of a pathway for people like Coco Gauff. I
Yeah.
don't know when you think. I was interested to get your take on when you sort of see maybe the transition into a younger wave of tennis. Obviously, I don't think Serena's done yet, and Venus, but it's starting to trend in that direction. Like you said, Naomi Osaka, these younger female tennis players. So I'll be interested to see when this kind of fizzles out. But just the dominance of Serena playing tennis is nothing we've ever seen before.
It's been a really fun few years in women's tennis because I think you're starting to see the younger wave now. Like, I really do. Like, I think that Serena is not, I mean, she's still incredible, but she kind of can't get over the hump now. Like, it is interesting because when you watch her play semifinals or finals, it seems over the last few years that she's so close, but she's never kind of come there. And I think Venus at this point in her career is not the same player.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I think the young wave started a few years ago. But it is, unfortunately, tennis, when they eventually retire, is not going to be perfect. the women's division is not, honestly doesn't get as much coverage as it should because it is remarkable. Um, it is the best tennis for me in the world, women's tennis over men's tennis. But I think that the parity is so enjoyable. Like it's going to be really enjoyable to watch these young players progress, and you're going to have so many monumental stars by the end of this decade that we never expected. Once these two hang it up in Serena and Venus.
And I don't want to take anything away from Serena Williams because I think she's done an outstanding job of kind of progressing the African American female athlete, obviously movement. You know, she's been one of the outspoken, obviously probably the most outspoken leader. People like LeBron, you know, taking notice as far as social justice issues and her being the one woman who does it. But does, you know, kind of these spells of how do I word it, arguments, I guess you could say, with these
Yeah.
referees, does that hinder anything for you, or?
It will always be part of her story, and it's been there even when she started. You know, I mean, it was there. You know, when she began in the '90s. It is something that will be part of her career story, but I don't think it's something that diminishes the way I will look at her career when she retires. Yes, it will be a piece of her career, a piece of her story, but at the end of the day, I think the dominance and success and just the overall growth of women's tennis because she's there, I won't look at it as worse as I did at the time. I just won't.
Yeah,
You know.
that's fair.
I understand it, but at the same time, I think when people look at her career, they're going to look at the statistics, they're going to look at the titles, and say, you know what, that was one piece of her career, but that wasn't what her legacy was about.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. I know there are, like you said, there are some people out there that are going to hold that a little bit higher. Not that I do,
Mm,
but you probably follow the sport. Well, you do follow the sport more than me, so I was curious to get kind of your take as
yeah,
far as, you know, kind of the tennis inside as far as, you know, media goes, to see if you've heard anything as far as.
I think there's also some recency bias with it. I mean, obviously, the last year's U.S. Open, and the and I assume if we do get a U.S. Open this year and she plays, like it's going to be there
Yeah,
during these U.S. Opens. It's going to be there, but at the same token, like I don't know. I don't see it when you look at the whole career as being that important. I think there's so much to do with the recency of what happened because it is remarkably recent with that match of Naomi Osaka where that kind of gets more in the forefront when we know that happened way back in the 90s as well and early 2000s with her, but those don't get talked about as much because guess what, this happened a few years ago.
yeah.
So 10, 20 years from now, I don't think so.
Hmm.
And number two, you got Brady. Of course, we talked about Brady. I mean this guy was picked 199th in the draft, couldn't run a lick, still can't. I
Yeah.
mean, he'll throw the ball instead of running for a first down. But either way, I mean, Brady is obviously, I think, the last of the few true pocket passers in this league. The league is changing, but he's still kind of the same old quarterback, and he still finds a way to get it done. And I think Bruce Arians is going to do so much with him in this decade as he kind of goes to the last steps of his career. But everyone will know him as a legendary Patriot and a Hall of Famer 6 years or however many years down the road. I guess 8, depending on how long he stays.
Yeah, definitely. That old 40 tape of him running, though, doesn't get old. Um, but like you said, I think the biggest thing for me with Tom Brady that stands out is his approach from the mental standpoint, you know, the mental side of the game. His dominance from a cerebral standpoint is something I don't think we've seen in another athlete. Also, of course, we have to touch on longevity. Like you're saying, we don't know how long he's going to stay around, but he's already, you know, 40 plus, and he's still, to me, as good as he's been. I know there's been some talk of him kind of falling off, but I'll be interested to see him in a new offense where, you know, he has more weapons around him and it's a little bit more opened up for him if he can get back to a little bit closer to the, like I said, that 2014 year when he was, I think, probably the best we've seen him. Um, Brady will always also be tied, of course, to Bill Belichick, wondering, you know, if it was a coaching thing or a player thing. I think
We'll
we're gonna
see.
see
We'll
that.
see after. We'll see this year. We'll see.
I think you're gonna see though Tom Brady this year is the real deal, and especially like you said for being the pick that he was. No one expecting anything from him, but he's also built his own brand, TB12, and fitness program, and like I said, that fits into something that I take into account when a guy can be that dominant for that long. I think that is a huge reason why he's number 2 on my list.
Uh, with Brady, how many years? I mean, it's over now that he's with the Bucks. No one really cares, but how many years did we have to go through of people saying Brady's dead and then he goes and wins the Super Bowl?
Yeah,
How many years in this decade did we have that? I mean, we had that for 4 straight years.
yeah.
It was exhausting.
It was. It became more of a topic than anything else. Is Brady finally going to fall off? And I think that to me is crazy when you're talking more about a guy falling off than you are. If he just keeps repeating it, at what point do you just say it is what it is? You know what I mean?
Like,
He's that good. Like it just is what it is.
let's just wait until it happens. Is kind of my
Yeah.
approach. After a couple years of that, I was like, "Are you guys serious?"
That was me last year when everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna fall off again." I had to see it, like you said. I had to see him lose for me to be like, "Okay, yeah, he can still lose."
And look,
Like,
the receiver core pissed him off. Let's be
yeah,
honest. It's a huge reason why he's with Tampa, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works. And then him getting Gronk, of course, as well. But
yeah,
um, Brady's legacy in the sport is cemented as the greatest of all time, and there is no debate.
yeah, definitely the greatest quarterback of all time. But like I said, his approach from a cerebral standpoint was what really stood out to me. I think he's the smartest quarterback to ever play the game, and like you said, he's never really had a whole lot of weapons. I mean, he had Gronk, which obviously is a huge weapon, but outside of that, Edelman is not thought to be that great of a receiver. You know what I
Edelman
mean?
was kind of built by Brady too, in terms of him as
Exactly.
a slot guy and stuff like that.
He had an aging Randy Moss. I don't know what that's worth, but he's never really had that much around him offensively. So I think that also plays into a role here.
And number one is LeBron. I mean, he is interesting looking at his just whole career because there's so many different stages to it. And now we're seeing him in LA and kind of him speaking on the entertainment piece as well. But LeBron on the court throughout this decade, I mean, there's no one better over the last decade of just someone who, as a player, just grew kind of before our eyes, of course, but is truly one of just sights to hold when you're watching basketball. There's really nobody like LeBron James, maybe ever.
Yeah, I think something you touched on with Simone Biles is also a point I want to bring up here with living up to the hype. You know what I mean? There's something to be said when we've been watching this guy since he's in high school, even before that, and he lives up to that billing. We've had a few guys in the past, that we've put this kind of label on, but no one's really been able to crack that mold of, I'm supposed to be the next best ever, and really has. But LeBron did do that, especially with all the hype surrounding him. But I think when we think of an athlete, as far as physique goes, this is exactly what we picture. You know what I mean? The guy is built like the best athlete, and I think it's remarkable to watch a guy that size, that big, that strong, run up and down on a basketball court, be able to cut like he does, and bring the power that he does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like you said, also the growth that we've seen him do, kind of like I mentioned with Tom Brady from a cerebral standpoint, LeBron James' growth as a basketball player, like you said, once he got to Miami and he could experience that culture, I think that's what sets him apart moving on. And then cementing him on this list for me was the championship in Cleveland. When he finally gets that ring for Cleveland, beats a really good Golden State team, first team to come down from 3-1. I think that's what cements him as the best athlete in this decade for me.
Yeah. All right, let's go sports moments. At number 10, I think I just sent you guys this clip a few days ago. Landon Donovan in 2010. Really a special team, but it didn't have the impact that it should have, I think, unfortunately. U.S. soccer is not in an incredible spot right now. And really this moment, unfortunately, didn't do as much as it should in terms of getting people excited about the sport. I don't know. Obviously it's not to take away from this moment and Landon Donovan's greatness, but unfortunately, for the men's team at least, it's like every 4 years we get excited about it, and then it kind of fades away, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I do want to mention though, if you do want to play the clip, you can double click that, and we can watch the clip if the viewers want to see it.
Actually, I'm not sure if it's working on this particular thing,
Oh,
but either way.
either way, yeah, I think you make up a good point. I think this I thought was going to kind of boost U.S. soccer as far as you know, kind of pushing it forward and creating some excitement around U.S. soccer. Landon Donovan obviously being pretty much the only star that we've had. Um, I mean, Clint Dempsey to a lesser degree, but it really I thought was going to start to boost U.S. soccer. Obviously, we didn't qualify for World Cup recently, but I think we are starting to get some of this youth and sort of this new wave of soccer in that I think will be exciting. But this is the one moment I think in U.S. soccer right now that we can look back and say that was, you know, outside of the Belgium game later on where Tim Howard had ridiculous amount of saves.
Oh my God, I remember that now. Oh wow, that was amazing. I remember those saves. Jesus.
Yeah, but outside of that, this is the one moment where I think the U.S., kind of had their soccer moment.
Yeah. And speaking on U.S. soccer as a whole, I mean, even from youth programs now, I mean, it's so much of like, a pay to join kind of model, and it's hurt the sport unfortunately as well. Unlike women's soccer, where it's partially like that, but more female athletes are going towards soccer than male athletes, unfortunately. And I mean, that obviously that's a great thing for our women's team because we put so much effort into that, but we really don't put as much effort into the men's teams, and it hurts even beginning at the youth level. And I think you can speak on that as well.
Yeah, that's something I had mentioned to you before. The pay to play model. I think U.S. is one of the few countries in the world that do that, which is with youth soccer, where we make the kids pay to play. Can be a really expensive sport, where most countries like Mexico, nearby, they find these guys at a youth level and they pay for them to be a part of their youth clubs, and they pay for them to be able to travel and stuff. So I think once we can get rid of kind of that model, you start to get some better youth, because not everyone obviously can afford to pay for this type of this level of soccer. So I think once you can kind of get away from that, you can really start to um, get some better youth talent in here. And obviously, when you have better youth talent, you're going to be able to develop more. I think the biggest thing that sets the U.S. aside is that they really do need to get some better training. I think the rest of the world really emphasizes training. I don't know that the U.S. has as good of training that they should have, especially in today's day and age where, I mean, we've heard Alexi Lawless, when they didn't qualify for the World Cup, say stuff like these guys are the spoiled generation of soccer. They've had every opportunity, but they just can't seem to put it together. But I do think moving forward, that not qualifying for that World Cup a couple years ago will always kind of linger and be kind of the pushing point for U.S. soccer moving forward.
That was a tough moment because I mean, CONCACAF is probably one of the worst federations in terms of core talent. I mean, it's really just Mexico and the U.S. And then, of course, just the presidency now. I mean, it's tough to even think about U.S. soccer towards the end of this decade because they picked a new president. Now he's gone because of the lawsuit and with the women's side, and of course that they were just being like the federation themselves, the soccer federation, going back to the women's side, like for them to say what they did in that court case was just horrible, and it's really frustrating. I don't know where the federation is going on both sides, and I think it's going to be tough for them to rebuild now towards this decade. What's your feeling on where the federation is as a whole now?
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit difficult. Like I said, I think it's trending in the right direction. Obviously, we've had our problems, like you said, with you know who's who's in charge. Basically, we've seen this problem in soccer all over the world. Though I think FIFA's had its problems from a top to bottom standpoint. I think you're all this is kind of just a soccer problem.
Yeah.
Um, but I think moving forward, I think it's a little bit more trending in the upward direction as far as U.S. soccer goes. I think you're starting to get the right pieces in place.
It's just you think it's going to take a bit of time, though,
Yeah,
potentially.
I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but I mean, it's a lot better than where we were like at this spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then at number 9, Tua. This was where the legend of Tua began. That comeback over Georgia. I believe this has some of the worst ratings of any college football final, just because everyone was tired of the SEC, including myself. I didn't really watch a ton of this game, but once Tua came in, man, all those viewers came back, and this is probably one of the best title games of the decade as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, this is the start of the kind of the Tua legacy. We we've never really seen a backup. I don't think we have ever seen a backup quarterback come in and win a game like this. Um,
Right.
Especially he was a freshman at this point, so that's another thing that we have to mention. Um, but I think you're right. I think it was kind of everyone was tired of the whole Alabama dominance thing. But I think this brought a spark to Alabama also in the fact that we've never really seen a dominant quarterback at Alabama. I've heard Shane and Brandon and you guys mention, their problems with the Alabama quarterbacks.
Oh, it's been bad,
Yeah, but
but
I
Tua
think
is different.
this is the one where you can't really argue with it. You know what I mean? I think we've seen this guy's talent, and I think this is kind of the shifting where Alabama might be able to bring in, a highly ranked quarterback. So I think Tua did something for Alabama here, but it was also really exciting to watch this game.
And then number 8, American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown. I mean, the Triple Crown is just special as a whole. It's amazing to see horse racing and to see the Triple Crown. It's something that you just watch because it's just kind of synonymous in some way with American culture, especially Southern American culture. But talk about American Pharoah and why you put that at number 8 here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any other reason that we would talk about horse racing. I do think there's something to be said, though. I think it is a bigger culture than people realize. Like you said, I think in the South, this is a bigger thing. There's a lot of gambling, obviously, that goes on. That's why this is horse
That's
racing is a
why it's
thing.
a big sport too.
Yeah, why it's even a thing. So, but to win the Triple Crown is like winning, batting title, home run derby, all that. I forget what they call it in baseball off the top of my head. Uh,
Yeah.
might be the Triple Crown, but it's the thing we look for as far as like just dominance in a sport goes. It never happens. So this is why this moment is so big to me, and it's something that headline ESPN for weeks. So if if a horse winning a race headlines ESPN, I think it's for a pretty good reason. So
Yep. And the culture in horse racing as a whole isn't amazing. Of course, we've seen a bunch of deaths and stuff like that with horses and stuff. So it's not a perfect culture, but this is one of the positives of the culture for sure. Um,
definitely.
and then Derek Jeter, talk about his legacy in baseball just as a whole, not only this walk off and his last at bat, but what was Derek Jeter? How was Derek Jeter important for you and just baseball as a whole?
Yeah, so growing up, Derek Jeter is who I thought of when I thought of baseball. Um,
Same
kind
here.
of
Same here.
kind of like what I talked about with Sidney Crosby. I think this is also a really good person that a sport can market. As far as being a good like leader, human being, overall, just a good person. Um, but this guy is he solidifies what baseball should be. He's a really good captain, a really good leader. I mean, his nickname is the captain, so there's a reason for people talking about him as much as they do. But also just the way that he played the game, his dominance at shortstop, and his bat was unbelievable for however many years he did it. But the legacy that he left in New York is something that will always be remembered. Just because people, when they play the shortstop position, I think this is who they think of. Didi Gregorius had a hard time, kind of filling the big shoes that he left. Not to take anything away from Didi, I think he's a really good player. But when you have this type of impact player at the shortstop position, it's going to be hard for anyone to follow.
Derek Jeter just as a whole too. I mean, imagine having how weird is it to have a player so beloved in a Yankees uniform? Like like no one really out of New York really likes the Yankees, but everyone loves Derek Jeter. Just to have a player so beloved on a team that's honestly so hated by most, I mean, it's amazing.
That's a really good point. Everyone hates the Yankees. So for the whole nation, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Derek Jeter, like you said. So that is something in itself to take into account because we all hate the Yankees, but we don't hate Jeter. So
Yeah,
there's a line there that you know.
yeah. And then so with the Minneapolis Miracle, I want to look back at this season first. This was the most bizarre football season of my life because everyone got injured at the quarterback position. This is when the NFL first kind of realized, like, oh crap, like we need to protect these quarterbacks, and we see the rule changes the last few years, warranted or not, because Clay Matthews has something to say about that for good reason, right? But I mean, it's this season was bizarre because everyone got injured, and it was just I don't know, like the viewership was weird because of it, but it was also still amazing to watch too at the end. But like Nick Foles and Case Keenum in an NFC title game, like what? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like it's still bizarre to me, but obviously this Minneapolis Miracle kind of in some way other than the Eagles winning the title kind of defines this season in a really positive way.
yeah, definitely the year of the backup quarterback. I think also when you say this is kind of a weird year in football, this is also what makes to me this Minnesota team so odd too, because you have Case Keenum leading, the way. It's a little bit not to take anything away from Case, but it was more or less of the defense. So to have it kind of end on this type of play is exciting. Um, but like you said, more or less the weird year in football that it was with the whole backup quarterback thing.
Yeah, and then I mean the Saints again. Like, man, it's rough. I'm not a Saints fan, but I understand it. I get it. It's rough. But I mean, honestly, it was also strange too because the Vikings were on this run when Minnesota was hosting the Super Bowl, and you kind of thought something special was happening there, and it was. But I think Case Keenum too, with this coaching staff, just as a whole, made him play better than he actually was. Like these were two quarterbacks in the NFC title game with Nick Foles and Case Keenum, where the coaching staff made them play better than they actually were.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something to be said about surrounding talent. Also, like I said, both those teams had pretty good defenses. Um, Case had Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, so I mean, you've got a pretty good receiving core there. Um, but to me, this will always, well, not always, but what I will think about when I think of the Vikings for the next couple of years.
Yeah,
Um, I think this is probably what made Stephon Diggs what he was. Not, I think he was a really good player, but I think this is, kind of his turning point as far as, being called an elite receiver
mm-hmm.
goes. Um, and I don't know if that's a good thing because it's, kind of a Hail Mary play that is going to probably define his career.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think it was obviously it's a really fun clip to watch if you guys want to go on YouTube and you watch
Yeah.
this one in particular. It's the Vikings broadcast of it. So to hear those guys literally yelling, "No way, no way!" Like this
Yeah,
obviously was a huge moment in Vikings history, but also really exciting for just the whole country to watch.
I watched the game recently on Game Pass. I think we still have free Game Pass for a little while. If you're looking for an actual game to watch or like watch the condensed game version of, this is one of the best ones because this game's just fun. Like these Vikings Eagles games to watch on Game Pass are just fun. This year with those two teams were just really interesting and fun to watch because there was just always these wacky moments in what was a weird season.
Yeah.
Um, And then at 5, Odell's catch. Why is this at 5?
Uh, to
It's
me, I just think the gravity of Odell making this catch. Obviously, this is what kind of blew Odell up. But I think also this is something that I talked about, with a couple different athletes. But Odell really became a global star after this. I think it's the first time we've seen really an NFL player become kind of a global star in the impact that he did. Um, and it's a real like true blowing up of an athlete. These other ones you can kind of make, like I said with Stephon Diggs, I think, it kind of made him a little bit bigger, but it didn't make him a real star like I think this catch did. And also the way that the Steph Curry impact in the NBA, where kids are trying to go out and shoot threes nowadays, and they yell Steph Curry. I think a lot of kids go out in the backyard now and want to be Odell when they make a catch.
Yeah.
It's our or this decade, not our decade, but this decade's probably version of getting mossed. I
Yeah.
remember growing up and wanting to moss people. This is probably these kids' version of that. When
Yeah.
you can make these type of grabs.
I mean, he really, as you said, became a superstar after this play. Sunday Night Football, all this stuff. But yeah, the gravity of the moment is amazing. But if you look at just for me in terms of moments, the impact of it on just like the level of the decade, it doesn't really fit for me because it was a regular season game. Cowboys and Giants always play on Sunday Night Football, whether we like it or not, because sometimes these two teams are just not that good. But again, the Cowboys get ratings, which is also part of this as well, because Cowboys always get ratings, and this game also had a high rating as well. But in terms of just, yeah, culturally, this was huge. And Odell, by the way, has a shoe deal partially because of this. He's the
Exactly.
only NFL player has a shoe deal. But I just, in terms of the impact of this entire season, it was there. It was a great play, but it was just a Sunday night game. It wasn't a playoff game. It wasn't the Super Bowl. For me, it doesn't have as much of an impact. Yes, it's an unbelievable catch, but doesn't have as much of an impact for me to put it at 5.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit higher, like you said, because it doesn't have really an impact on a season or wins or anything like that. But like I said, just for that type of spark, like you said, he gets a shoe deal, I think, because of this. I think this is what makes Odell Odell. And like you said, this is the first football player that we have a shoe deal for. Like I said, he becomes a global star, which we haven't really seen in football a whole lot, as I think he's the most recognizable person in China or something like that. Like there's weird numbers out there you know, as far as Odell is concerned. So I think there's something to be said for, making that kind of boom. Obviously it's not, as far as the season goes, as far as, uh, NFL is concerned, as far as ratings go, it's not that big of a deal. But this is a little bit higher, but I think it's something that we all talked about for weeks on weeks.
And then at 4, here we go. Oh boy. All right. I was wearing my hands up for this one. Not only this fight, not only this fight, but go back to 2010. I mean, you have a much bigger range of this than I do, as I've only followed MMA fairly recently. I did watch this fight a few times, actually, but go back to 2010 until now. How has MMA changed? Because it's changed tremendously over the 2010s.
Yeah, so it's something that I've always kind of had a gripe with when you and me talk about. I think Connor is, whether or not I agree with it, is the reason that UFC kind of became a bigger thing. And like I've said once, and I'll say it again, I think it's transitioning into a lot. It's a lot more marketed, and it's a lot more broadcasted and stuff. It's becoming almost. I'll get gripe for this too, like a WWE type of thing. I know I always say it, but it's becoming more of like a show than it is an actual fight. Now, when the fight lives up to this fight in particular, I have absolutely no problem with it. When you're putting on all these marketing, tools and really putting it out there, when the fight lives up to this, it's great. It's just I have a problem, and I have some conspiracies that I know you don't want to hear, as far as fixing fights and stuff like that go. But when we can get an actual fight that lives up to the hype, it's outstanding. It's just I have a problem, like you said, before 2010, I felt like we had more like slug it out fights. I feel like it's becoming less and less of a thing. Um,
Mm.
but I think this is the fight that, regardless of you being a UFC fan, fighting fan, boxing fan, whatever, this is something we all watched, really. And I think it's one of the first ones that we can say in a long time that, because obviously boxing has really diminished in its spotlight.
Mhm.
So it's exciting for me as a UFC fan to have fighting back on a bigger scale.
Yeah. I mean, boxing is not the same. I could be partially due to this fight in particular, but Connor and Ronda as well were kind of the two stars that really put this sport even more on the map than it already was. And of course, I think you would have to put another fight on this list that you might not enjoy as an MMA fan, but let's be honest, culturally, it is probably, other than this fight, probably one of the most important fights of the decade in Conor versus Floyd Mayweather, where that fight just got so much hype. And that was another one of those fights where it was definitely more hype based than anything. But in terms of like importance, it's probably up there to this one because keep in mind the ESPN deal was a year after that fight.
Yeah, that was one I debated either putting that in this spot or this one in this spot. The only reason I put this one on here is because I think the growth of the UFC, like you said, after this, boxing has really been undervalued. It's obviously transcending in the fact that you have a guy like Conor McGregor, who's a UFC fighter, going into a boxing ring. Like you said, the hype surrounding it. Um, Floyd's pretty much the only guy that I think can market a boxing match. So that's why that one to me is, in the conversation. But I think this one, as far as fight entertainment goes, is a little bit bigger. That's why I put this one in here
Mhm.
instead of that one. The other one I think is more marketing. You know what I mean? I think it's more of a entertainment grab.
Yeah.
Which is why I put this one here instead. But like you said, both those fights are transcending in the fact that I think they both really put UFC on the map, really. I
Yeah.
think this is one of the first ones. Like you said, outside of Ronda Rousey, we've never really had an athlete like Conor McGregor in the UFC. Being able to market stuff. It used to just be, you get in the octagon and you fight rather than, all the other stuff that comes with it. Now,
Right.
that's a good thing for the UFC, and
Yeah.
I think it brings viewerships and it's going to bring more fighters. But like me and you have talked about in the past, it's going to bring a whole nother another problem that I don't know if the UFC is ready for, as far as fighter
Fighter pay,
fighter pay.
pay per view, things of that nature as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and then at number three, we got the Ray Allen shot. I mean, I don't know if this is the start of the 3-point era, but like Ray Allen being put on this team, there's a specific reason why he was there, and this kind of showcases that piece, right? The three, like Ray Allen's piece on this 2013 team in particular, like he was really important and isn't mentioned as much as he should.
yeah, definitely. To me, Ray Allen is the greatest shooter of all time.
Other
Pure
than
shooter.
Steph, you can't put Steph on there.
I don't put Steph because like you said, I think it's a different era. Obviously, I think Steph is a better off the dribble shooter, but I think pure shooter, I think Ray Allen is a better shooter. Um, Ray Allen also, was basically game plan to just shoot threes, not a whole lot else. So I think it's a different kind of comparison to me as a basketball coach and obviously a huge basketball fan, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but I think you're right. I think this is the start of that kind of 3-point era in the NBA. But also, just to speak on this moment, I think this is arguably the biggest moment in NBA history, just moment itself, because I think when you look at it, this is the solidification of this Miami Heat team, but also you had fans leaving thinking the game was over. I think
People left.
the call of this game was really good.
Yeah.
I think especially that last shot, I think it was really good. But then Miami being able to come back and actually win the finals is also a part of this. So to me, this shot is arguably up there with MJ's final shot and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's a really big moment, and of this last decade, I don't think there's a bigger
Yeah.
role.
A couple pieces that I just remembered too in your top 10 athletes list. I don't think Steph Curry or Tiger Woods was up there. Are there any reasons why those two weren't left out or were left out?
So I didn't put Tiger in there because I think the later half of the decade, obviously he had his problems, and
Hmm.
stuff like that, and I think he fell off a little bit, especially these last couple years. So if I'm looking at longevity over the decade, that's why I didn't really put Tiger. It was really hard for me to leave Tiger off the list, to be honest.
Hmm.
But Steph Curry, to me, and it's another hot take for you, but I think he's more of a product of his surroundings as far as scheme and talent around him. So I understand he transcends the game as far as three-point shooting goes, but it's hard for me to put him on a top 10 athlete list, especially when I don't really consider him a full-rounded NBA player when he doesn't necessarily have defensive skills and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
to me, that's why he's left off the list there.
All right. Okay. I mean, the transcending. I get Tiger not being on the list, and also get to Tiger in on this list as well at some point. But I mean, I think just the transcending of the sport is enough to put him on a top 10 athletes list. But either way, I get it because you also wanted to do different sports and stuff, so it's a much different list as well.
Yeah.
But at number 2, can I talk about this game for a second? I feel bad about this game because this is kind of like the last year of me being like a true fan. Like now I'm like not as much anymore. I try to be more impartial as best as I can. I know I'm not perfect. I get it. But I feel bad about this game because this is one of the only games that I just don't remember much of. This is exactly why I eventually want to do a rewatchables on this game and rewatch the whole game, because here's the thing. I just don't remember anything about it other than, I think Chris Matthews' big catch and then this play. I just don't remember much about it, and I feel terrible because this is the one game where I should know every play, but I don't.
Yeah, I think that's has everything to do with the last play being what it was. I think if the last play wasn't what it was, I think you'd remember a lot more. But the frustration surrounding that last play is obviously going to be,
Yeah.
front and center. To be honest with you, I remember watching this game and I almost turned it off with, I think at the start of the fourth quarter, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Seahawks had a pretty decent lead. I think it might have been 7 or 10.
This is why I need to watch the game again. We should do rewatchables on this game if you're down for it, because I need to rewatch this game pretty badly.
Yeah, definitely. But this is one that I basically turned off being a Niners fan because I didn't want to see the Seahawks win again, so this one was a little bit difficult for me. But yeah, I think, like you said, I don't think a lot of people are going to remember anything from this game just because of the drama that happened on the last play.
Yeah.
I've actually never got your personal take on if you thought that if there was even a debate of running the ball. So I'd be curious.
Here's my thought. It's the dumbest debate in NFL history. It's the dumbest debate in NFL history. It's the most pointless debate ever. And here's why. So in the years following this, I don't know why. I think it's just because of the whole argument. I paid a closer attention to sort of this whole 1 yard line garbage where, how many times do you see a running back, let's say even as physical as Marshawn Lynch, not get the touchdown or not get the first down on a 3rd and 1? The probability is not 100%. Okay? It's not. And at the same time, it's a pointless argument because even if they were to throw the ball, it doesn't really matter because, it was mostly, if you look at the play itself, it was just the wrong play. They could have ran a different passing play and scored. For me, it's just a pointless argument because imagine if Marshawn Lynch did run the ball and didn't make it. Guess what people would have said? You should have passed. This is a pointless argument.
I can't remember. Was this was it 2nd down or was it 3rd?
I don't remember. I think it was 2nd down.
I think they had a couple of chances. I think that's where the grief comes from. Is I think it's okay, maybe you run it once, and if it doesn't happen, then you pass. But I also want to ask you: do you think? To me, I'm big into conspiracies. Okay, to me, this was more of, let's make Russell Wilson kind of the guy, and let's get him paid so that way, we can kind of.
No. God, no. Do you realize at this time the defense was still Russell was important, but the defense was still
but that's my thing. I feel like it was more of a grab to,
But it can't be, because you have to also keep in mind that Russell didn't even get paid until last year. Hardcore money, he didn't get paid until last year. I just feel like the whole optics of this play creates the most pointless argument in NFL history.
Yeah,
It's pointless. It makes no sense. It's a waste of everyone's time that it's still even discussed. Look, if they ran a different passing play, I'll be honest, the Seahawks probably would have won and it wouldn't have mattered. But they ran this particular play. Malcolm Butler knew exactly what to do and he picked it off. I don't even know what to say other than that. Do you see my point? It's not. I'm not making the best argument. I've made this argument way too much. I think I've lost pieces of my point. But do you see my point? Do you see kind of what I'm trying to say?
I get it kind of. It's a little bit. I just like to rub it in,
You don't have
Obviously,
to because I don't really care.
no,
Honestly,
no,
going
not just for you, but like to me, I can't understand it just so that way I can tell other. Like, I don't want to have to understand that, so that way I can just tell people it was the dumbest decision ever, type of thing. So I'm probably a little bit biased. Like you said, I've probably made that argument 1,000 times, and I probably lost pieces of my argument just trying to like reedify how stupid I thought that decision was. But also something I want to ask you as far as this play is concerned, when is a good time for you to, if ever, to just let the other team score? Because I'm pretty sure when the Seahawks got down around this, there was about 1 minute left. And I remember I was advocating for the Patriots to just let them score because I thought Brady had a better chance of scoring rather than stopping them on the 1 yard line.
I,
Is there a time or, you
I
know,
have to again. I have to watch this game over, and this is exactly why I feel like we need to do your watchables and do a deep dive not only on this moment but the game as a whole. Because again, as I said, almost everything from this game is murky for me, and it just frustrates the heck out of me. Because as a diehard Seahawks fan at the time, I feel like that's part of why I'm so clouded with it. And I wish I could watch this game over and have just a clear mind. I feel like
yeah.
we need to deep dive on this game more to really understand a lot of the intricacies. But one other piece for this for me was Malcolm Butler himself.
Hmm.
Because in the years following, at least the 2 years after this, he really became an excellent corner. And then he went to Tennessee, he kind of fell off. But was he more of a product of Belichick's system in the years following when he became, honestly, a top 10, top 15 corner?
Yeah, to me, he is probably more of a product of his surroundings, head coach and everything. Um, Not that he's not a good corner. I just don't know that he had the value that he thought he did. But I never blame a guy for cashing in on his moment. This was his chance to, say, I want to get paid. I've had my bigger moments, this obviously being the biggest. So I'm not going to knock him for that. There's a time and place for everything, and you have to cash in when you can cash in as a player. Um, and I think he knew that. I think, honestly, he knew he wasn't like a top level cornerback. Like you said, I think he was a solid cornerback, but I don't even think he thought that he was like top level.
And it was so unfortunate in the years following. I believe what was it, the Eagles Super Bowl when Belichick didn't
Yeah.
put him in, and that like obviously kind of set the alarm off, and he went to Tennessee. But that still to this day frustrates me because I honestly think he would have had a huge impact on that game in particular as well.
I think so too. I think he would have made a much bigger impact than the guys they had out there. But we all know how Belichick is as far as I'm pretty sure he missed curfew or whatever. He was out at a party or something, is what we heard.
But again, like it's the Super Bowl, man. Like deal with it after the season. Like God,
Yeah.
like he played
But
the whole year. Like it's the Super Bowl. Like
I know,
how
but
how hard
we,
is
we
this?
know how Belichick is. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? We know that no player is above the system. So
yeah. I don't know. It's not something that I really enjoy talking about, or never really gone into that conversation of why he didn't play or whatever. But man, it's the Super Bowl.
it
I
was
think it's that
frustrating.
simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is definitely frustrating.
And at number one, probably my favorite moment of all time, LeBron's chase down in Game 7. The Ringer did a really good deep dive piece, Bill Simmons and Brian Windhorst, about this. They have a clip on YouTube about this, but they were talking about how like in the plays after they like could never score because they were like so shell shocked by the moment, and
Yeah.
like Iggy, how he was like didn't want to like get fouled or stuff like that. So there's a lot of pieces surrounding this moment, but and I believe Bill Simmons put this so perfectly, and I want to share this, but it's that how perfect is it for LeBron in his career that his moment is a defensive play? Like, I thought that, like, wow, that's an interesting point. And so, but speak on that and also like this moment itself.
Yeah, I think it definitely is an interesting point. I think early on in his career, LeBron was kind of known for these chase down blocks. You know what I mean? I think this was kind of his thing early on, at least defensively. Um, but for the first half of his career, we didn't really like think of LeBron as a dominant offensive player. I mean, he had his moments, but I think you're right, and I think I forget who you just said mentioned that point.
Yeah, Bill
Um,
Simmons did. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Bill Simmons. I think that's a really valid point because I would rather see LeBron kind of known a little bit more for his defense because I think he was is a great defensive player when he wants to be. Um, but this moment in particular, yeah, I think we saw Golden State a little bit timid. Like you said, I do remember seeing Iguodala like not wanting to drive after that. You know what I mean? Like he didn't really have the same, like you said, kind of emphasis on getting to the lane, which is what he's better at rather than shooting. So I think this play kind of helped that as far as defensively for the Cavs. But this to me is LeBron's obviously his big moment in his career. It solidifies the championship for them, and it brings that title to Cleveland that he had, that illustrious title that he had been chasing for so long for his city, which is really cool to see. Especially like I said earlier on, coming back from 3-1. No other team in NBA Finals has done that. The play that gets obviously forgotten in this is Kyrie's three on the other
Yeah. I was
end,
just gonna bring that up. Yeah.
which is obviously the probably the bigger play, because you take the lead. But this is LeBron's probably signature moment for this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, in let's first also deep dive on the series as well because 3-1 down, 73 win team, and obviously everyone kind of blames Draymond Green for that whole mess in Game 5. But what do you think went wrong for the Warriors here in this kind of big debacle towards the end of this series? Is it the Draymond Green play or is it something bigger for you looking back at it?
I think it's a little bit Draymond. I don't put the full emphasis on Draymond like most people do. I don't know that, obviously Draymond makes his impact, but I don't know that that changes the course of a series. I don't know if Cleveland's like, you know what, he's suspended, like we have our shot now type of thing. You know what I mean? Um, but I think it's more of a coaching thing than people realize. I think Ty Lue did a really good job of, kind of rallying the troops. I think LeBron also understood, this is probably the one year that he really did have a chance as far as, I think also the 73 wins did play a role in it. Being fatigued is huge in the NBA when these guys are playing heavy minutes and stuff. Um, but yeah, to me, I think it's more on the Cavs than it is, a falling out of the Warriors.
All right, and then your honorable mentions here. There's a lot of really good ones, man. There's also
Yeah,
one here that I just remembered that you didn't put on, which I'll mention. But the kick six is a crazy play.
it
The
is.
commentary is ridiculous. Cubs, of course, we talked about. Leicester winning the Premier League. Again, back to soccer. I want to bring this up, obviously, because people. I mean, everyone knew about Leicester, but talk about that Premier League season because I'm sure you watched more of that season than I did, and like having Leicester play as good as they did throughout that year.
Yeah, definitely. The only reason this one for me didn't make the list is because it was less of a moment and more of a season. Obviously, them hoisting the trophy is one thing, but when it's over the course of a season, I don't know that I define that as a moment. But Leicester at the beginning of the season had like I don't even know something thousand to one.
It was I think it was 15,000 to 1 odds.
Yeah, some ridiculous thing. I mean, they were pegged to be, in the relegation zone. I'm pretty sure, so they were. It was something that no, it's probably arguably the biggest upset as far as sports goes, and not many people realize that. But over the course of a Premier League season, there's so many teams, that bounce around a little bit. It's hard for a team like this at the bottom to really get on a run. I think what sets this team apart, though, is I don't know that they were necessarily looking for wins. I don't know that they were looking for 3 points every game. It's more of a coaching thing, and they really got
Vardy too, man.
Vardy had an outstanding season, and Mahrez did too. Obviously, he got transferred after the season, but this team to me was looking for draws at certain point, and that's to me what set this apart is because they were going into games hoping for just the 1 point instead of a 3 for a win, and they really just stayed the course of a whole season rather than getting wrapped up in winning individual games. Obviously, I think it was a down year for the Premier League this year. I don't think the dominant 5 teams or whatever that we usually have were as dominant, but that's not to take away from Leicester, especially like I said, coming into the season, thought maybe they were going to be relegated and stuff like that.
Yeah. I remember the shock when everyone realized, like, oh my God, it's going to happen.
Yeah,
The collective shock of the world was one of the most insane things.
definitely. I mean, it was arguably the most biggest upset, and if I'm not mistaken, there was one guy who did bet on Leicester, and
Yeah, there was one guy who did, yeah.
and
He like randomly betted at a
he bet
bar.
like $10 or something, something stupid, and he just paid out. It's his hometown team, and he ends up cashing out on him. But you're right. The collective shock of the whole world, not just the soccer world, but I think the whole world is something like I said with American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown is, this was the headline for ESPN. And not often do we find soccer in the headline for ESPN,
Yeah.
So it was a really exciting story. And I think towards the later half of that season is when people did start to realize and we're kind of like, is this really going to happen? Like, is this?
Yeah.
And I think there's only, excuse me for interrupting, but I think there's only 5 teams that have won the Premier League, and it's been the same, like 5, Chelsea, Man U.
Yeah.
I think 6 now with Liverpool, but Leicester is like, the only one that outside of those top clubs have been able to crack that.
And Leicester with Vardy still there, I mean, they're still semi-competitive too now.
Yeah, they're in Champions League spot. So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it translated to them to becoming a little bit more of a,
a powerhouse.
Yeah.
This one should have been on the list.
Yeah.
I remember oh my God, like I how many years? How many years are you watching like CBS or TNT and they're going, do you think this will be the year?
Yeah.
How many times
every year? This was the first 16 to upset a one. So I mean
it was like every year. Do you think this is gonna happen? No. Do you think this is gonna happen? No. And then it happens in the most bizarre way possible with UMBC upsetting Virginia. And Little Caesars gave out pizza too for this one. I got free pizza like 2 months later. Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even know that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, every year filling out March Madness brackets, you never ever. I mean, sure you can try and pencil in a 16 to beat a 1, but the odds are always against you because it's never happened until this. So I mean, and I'm pretty sure they dominated most of this game. Like, they were up by...
Yeah, they were... Like, the first quarter was ridiculous.
Yeah, quite a marginable amount. And, I mean, also, if I'm not mistaken, I think they either got to the Elite Eight, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, it wasn't just like a fluke one game that they won.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they won a couple. It wasn't like they were great, but they surprised some teams.
Virginia, ever since that moment, it's always been weird because I remember the next year they were, I think, the overall number 1 seed, and they struggled with the 16th seed. So it's always something that kind of haunts them.
Yeah,
and haunts us all the time in the brackets too.
It will always be something that they're like, no, are we gonna lose to 16 again? But did the next year? I can't remember. It was either the next year or the year after that.
No, the next year they were down by 15 in the second quarter, and people were freaking out.
Yeah, that will always be because I'm pretty sure that was the year that they were really dominant too.
Oh yeah, they were ridiculous.
Regular season, so it was like, but that's March Madness for you. I love those upsets. Even
that's why we watch it.
Your bracket, it's always exciting.
Yeah, it was a really really fun year, but that one should have been on this list because like when are we ever gonna see that again? I don't think ever.
Very true. Wait, I wanted to get your.
Yep.
You had one more.
Oh, yes, one more. Masters 2019. Tiger Woods. I mean, look, I watched it a few months ago again. Tiger as a whole, I mean, like that what he came back from to win the Masters, man. Like it was just kind of like this like homegrown story for everyone of like this is like a comeback story that we can all like embrace, and him with his kids at the end crying and all that stuff. I mean, all he went through, and then for him to actually get the Masters again and feel like he can actually come back and do something towards the end of his career is ridiculous.
Very true, especially with the the narrative surrounding him. Everyone thought he was done, and he really put in a solid performance, especially like you said with all the stuff that he had been through. Probably definitely one that could be on the list, at least honorable mention.
Yeah. And then I mean, Tiger's just legacy is always going to be really weird, but I mean, he'll have a shot to really win some majors down the road in 2020. Here's your Mount Rushmore. You got LeBron, you got Serena, you got Messi here, and then you got Tom Brady. What stands out for you in this Mount Rushmore list?
Yeah, so obviously to me, what stands out is Messi. I could hear in your voice that one was a little bit of a shock to you.
Yeah, because you literally said Messi over Ronaldo, and you put Messi on your Mount Rushmore list, even though it was like behind Ronaldo on your athletes
As
list.
far as athlete for athlete, I think Ronaldo's a better athlete. But what I think Messi did for the game of soccer, and that's why to me he's on the Mount Rushmore, is because soccer is such a global sport. We don't give a whole lot of credit here in the U.S. to it. But it's the biggest sport worldwide. So I felt the need to include a soccer player, and I think most people outside of me, follow Messi the most.
Yeah,
So that to me is why he's on this list. And like I said before, I'm not trying to take away anything from his game. I think he's an outstanding player. I think, like I've mentioned with previous, athletes on this list or whatever, I think this is the guy that kids kind of, try to emulate. They all wear Messi jerseys. They want to be like Messi. Less of Cristiano. I think more of Messi. And also to go along with those Barcelona teams that I had mentioned before, where it was kind of a signature. I think the signature soccer team throughout times, and him being the star, it's hard for me to leave him off this list.
yeah. And then we also have some pop culture ones. I don't even know why you put this on here, but this one I didn't like at all. I didn't like this list at all because okay, so you have like
No,
Nintendo.
wait. Let me start off by saying I did not. This is not my like one through whatever.
Oh,
I
okay.
I just put these on here just for you and me to kind of shoot back and forth.
Okay. So I think at one has to be PlayStation, just because the reality is they've always had they've always had just like the better games. At times the better console. Of course, PS3 is the anomaly, but they've always kind of been the big dog in this industry.
Yeah. To me, I put Nintendo above because I think that was the first kind of breakthrough,
Yeah.
and I think it had a little bit more signature games to go along with it.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
would
mean?
assume so. I
Like
mean,
you had,
we're not looking at the decade here, are we? We're looking at like
no,
all
this
time.
is all time. This is
Okay.
just something I just wanted to throw in at the end. I know it's a little bit random for our viewers, but I saw something on Facebook that said, like, what is the first game you think of when you think of GameCube? And I was like, you know what? Let's actually debate what we think of when we think of all these consoles.
Um. Yeah. So
But
I
to me,
think.
Nintendo 64 was like the first one that had signature games as far as Super Mario, Mario Kart,
Yeah.
a lot of like signature games to go along with the console. I know this is a consoles list, but I felt like that was kind of the
Yeah.
first, for me anyway, that I was like, oh yeah.
Nintendo basically saved the gaming industry with the NES more particularly, but also the N64. So yeah, I could see them being high on this list. Other than that, the Game Boy.
I'm with you. I put PlayStation above Xbox. I know there's a lot of people that like Xbox. I love the 360. Like when I
Oh,
had
I have it. I have one. It's
yeah,
amazing.
like the 360 was my one Xbox machine that I can't get rid of. But other than that, I think PlayStation has just, like you said, all around been better.
Yeah.
But then the debate for me kind of kicks in. I mean, you can a
And,
lot of people like Wii. I'm not a huge Wii
oh
guy.
God, no. Okay, wait. Let me. Okay, Game. This is when Nintendo became the like just a bizarre company. I even have a Wii, and you know what? That's the one console I regret getting. It is. It's the
It's a
one I regret
it's a
getting
little fuzzy.
because I mean, look, I get the whole, oh yeah, it was like a cultural console or whatever, and it pushed PlayStation and Xbox to create all these, like the Kinect or whatever, which was an
Yeah.
epic failure. Like, once we hit the GameCube and Wii era of Nintendo, and then of course Wii U, which is not on this list, God bless.
Oh
Even
yeah,
though I
we.
want one,
I
to be
forgot about
fair.
Wii U.
You forgot. There's a reason you forgot about it. They literally took it off their whole atmosphere. They don't even want people to know about it anymore. It
Uh,
was so bad. But I still want one, in fairness. But no, like GameCube and Wii and then the Wii U was just such a weird time for Nintendo because they even now it's strange with the Switch because you're like they're not at the same level in terms of graphics and all this stuff with PlayStation and Xbox and even PC where it's like it's just kind of weird. They're in a much different path now. And while it's working with the Switch, it didn't work previously.
yeah, I agree. I feel like GameCube was still a really solid console.
I
I
still
feel
have a GameCube. It's not bad, but I wish I had a PS2 instead now. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like,
I spent so much time on the GameCube. It's probably more of a thing of like nostalgia for me, where I'm
mhm.
like, oh yeah, that's a lot of my childhood. But to me, actually, I'd probably lean towards the Game Boy. I think that being the first like portable, thing you could take around. I remember so many times at the Boys and Girls Club, which is basically where I grew up. Like
Oh
being,
my
oh,
God. I
do I
remember
have my
those
Game Boy?
days.
Yeah, do I have my Game Boy? It's like I that so many Pokemon games on there and stuff that I
Yeah,
played. That was the first one where you could tote it around. So that
yeah.
to me is boosted up on the list.
I remember those Boys and Girls Club days with the GameCube. Everyone was just playing Madden football on it. I'm like, this looks horrible. Like it.
FIFA? Do you remember the old FIFA on the Xbox, like the original Xbox?
No, I don't.
Oh, that was a good one. Like FIFA '02 on the Xbox. That's what got me hooked. I was like, oh, this is awesome.
PSP is a good selection here as well. DS is nice as well. I got the DS Lite
Oh yeah,
during my time, but PSP is a nice selection because I think the PSP is pretty underrated
I think it is
nowadays.
too. I think that's. I had two PSPs, but
Two of them.
I used to play Madden '09 on that thing all the time. Madden '09 was my game. Um, but yeah, the PSP is underrated as far as these go because I think also, I don't know. Actually, I don't think so. But the PSP you could watch like movies on and stuff. You
Yeah,
know what
you
I
could
mean?
play. You could have. I remember like MLB The Show. If you had a PS3 and you had MLB The Show and you had it for PSP, you can actually like continue your save on
Yeah,
PSP, and like also the same with Vita, which I'm glad Vita isn't on this list because Vita is not as important unless you use like remote play and stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, why is Atari on this list for you? That's
It's
that's going way
just
back.
classic. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, it's just like Pong and Pac-Man and all that. That's the console I think of. I don't think it's one that like I would use or want to use or have any like feeling towards ever wanting to like really own or anything. But I think as far as all-time gaming consoles go, it's probably what an older generation thinks of. So
yeah.
it's lower on my list, but it's something to be mentioned.
Is there any other like specific consoles that you want to bring up? Like talk about the DS, for example, or is there any other ones that you want to bring up from this list?
Um, I never owned a DS, so I can't really speak on the
It
specifics of
was it
that.
was really weird.
I,
DS
I
for me is
remember
weird.
I remember my sister had one and she would like lived on it. So I remember it being like similar to me being on a PSP, which was my version of kind of that portable thing. You know, I don't really know how it worked with the two screens. I never really saw gameplay on it, so I don't
Yeah.
really know how the two screen thing
It's
worked.
the DS is probably one of the most, at least for me, because honestly, I've stopped playing portable stuff unless I get like a Switch at some point. I'm probably done with like portable consoles and stuff because it's just bizarre. Like I don't know, like
I feel like it is a little bit bizarre. I mean, unless you're on like a road trip, I feel like it's just a little awkward type of
Yeah.
thing.
And look, I like the DS Lite. I had like Pokemon on it and all that stuff, but it like I don't know, like it was just, and it was also weird because Nintendo was also getting in these fads in the DS era. I mean, they're still throwing out DSs, but they had the 2DS, which was like kid friendly. The 3DS was weird a little bit because it's like, oh, that whole 3D garbage thing,
Yeah,
where like everyone was like fat on 3D and all that stuff. So it was just such a, I don't know, portable consoles for me now are just weird.
yeah. Also, since it sounds like you know like a lot about it or somewhat about it, I don't even know really what the Switch is. You want to fill me in on
What
that
do you
one?
mean you don't know what the Switch is?
Like I know what it is, but I don't know what it's supposed to like be or do or what games are on there. Like
Well, I
what?
mean, it's very so Nintendo nowadays. It's quite unfortunate because the whole reason why I hate that I had a Wii was because I would play games like Madden or FIFA on it and be weird and stuff. I mean, it'd still be fun, but it'd be weird. But Nintendo now as a product is strange because I do wish they were on the same graphical level as Xbox or PlayStation, but
Yeah,
they've kind of switched off. And like with the Switch, it's like it's nice because you can put it on a dock and play it on your TV, but you can also like take it with you, and it's basically the same quality, and it's nice, and it's really fun. Like I would love to get one at some point, but the reality is, I'm sorry, don't play NBA 2K on it. Don't play FIFA on it. Don't play Madden's not coming on it. Don't play WWE. That's literally the worst game on there on that console is WWE 2K. It's terrible. It literally is the worst game ever. And it's like a newer WWE game, like one of their latest ones, and it's horrible. But if you're into like Nintendo and you play like Mario or stuff like that, man, it's good. Like it's really good, and it's surprising how popular it got because it got back to the roots of like what made the Wii special to a lot of people.
yeah. That to me is where I've always kind of differentiated like PlayStation and Xbox from Nintendo. Is I feel like it's really good for those like you said like Mario or like Animal Crossing or stuff like
Right.
that. But I just feel like it can't even come close to like a Madden or a FIFA or
Yeah. At
NBA.
least at least for us, I think. I feel like you and I both get more enjoyment for those type of games. And then the Xbox One too. I mean, that to me is one of the weirdest for this previous console generation. Of course, PS4 won pretty openly, but I remember the Xbox reveal, and I was excited for it. But at the same time, like as the generation went on, and obviously that reveal is so weird because, and I've always looked back on it because it's just if you watch pieces of that reveal, they said TV over 1,000 times and promoted it as like an entertainment product on these things, and then of course you remember NBA Live, which honestly I still really like, even though it's not a great game. But it's like, and with the whole EA thing. But I look back on that reveal and I realize something about consoles is like the reveal tells a lot about the story of these consoles. If you have a good reveal and a good showing at E3 and your reveal conference, it can really set you up for a good whatever decade to come, I guess. And that just wasn't the case for Xbox One. It kind of reminds me of the PS3 era too for PlayStation.
Yeah, I feel like it was one of those things where they tried to kind of rush something out, more or less. You know what I mean? Kind of like you said with the PlayStation 3. I don't know that there was that much of a leap in the actual product.
It was
Um,
also hard for developers to develop because the product, like the processors, were so messed up for PS3.
yeah, but one thing I do want to bring up since you brought up NBA Live, obviously I feel like I play 2K. Okay, obviously
Yeah.
you like Live. We both play Madden. At what point are we just gonna say this is the same game coming out over and over? Like, don't get me
How
wrong,
many
I love
times?
these
How
games,
many times
but
do we say that?
I know that to me is just so shocking. Like, it's just like every year we get suckered, or at least I do. I know you and me have had this talk, and you're like, I'm not willing to pay that much for the same video game, but I get suckered into paying, $60 for the exact same game with updated rosters. It's terrible.
I just don't pay $60 for games anymore.
It's terrible.
I haven't done it in years, and it's not. And it's like I don't know what it is. I think it's because I'm in college. Like I probably if I had enough money would sucker up and pay for it. But for me, it's just not worth the $60 price tag that it's put at
Yeah,
nowadays. It's just not.
you've kind of talked me out of it. I used to like 2 years ago. I used to do it. Now I just wait for it to be $30. What
Or
it's like
cheaper.
that sale price that they put out usually when it's like halfway through the season or whatever. That's
Yeah.
usually when I budge. Um, but yeah, I just feel like we get the same games over and over. It's like it's just updated rosters, and I just question myself every time I do it. I'm like, do I really want to do this? Like, I could just play last year's with a little bit less of a roster, but
Well, no, I mean, I think one of the interesting things, at least for Madden this year, is franchise mode still looks terrible, which I know has frustrated many people in the Madden community, including us, for a long time. But and they didn't make any significant changes this year, no surprise. And I'm an Ultimate Team guy. I love Madden Ultimate Team. I've been encouraging you to get on Ultimate Team for a while because it's quite addicting. Although after a while it does get boring. But I do feel like this Madden in particular this year, they've actually focused on minimal changes. I think one of the things, and I think you can probably speak to this as well with FIFA, is that sometimes the minimal changes are the best changes. The overhaul of a particular piece of the game makes more sense and is more enticing for us to buy than this brand new mode or this brand new feature that overall can get a bit tiresome as the year or as the game cycle goes along.
yeah, I tend to agree with that. I've made this point to you 100 times, especially with FIFA, is sometimes they do way too, like you said, way too much. Like you used to be able to have like pace in FIFA, like a guy used to be faster. And I've made this complaint to you 100 times now, where like a center back can chase down a winger with 99 pace, and I'm just like, why do I even play this game? Like this is not even like I'm playing a through ball, you know what I mean? And the center
Yeah.
back's just faster than my 99 pace. It doesn't even make sense to me. It's like they overthink the game sometimes too much. I understand sometimes, like in years past, I've definitely played and had, a pace horse that I can just send a through ball and he's, wins
Yeah.
every time. I get these minor problems. But yeah, I think it's something that it's hard for them. I don't know. I'm not a video game developer, but it must be hard to do. I do like some of these, like this FIFA when they finally put out the street soccer again. I was so happy to see that because it reminded me of the old Street
The
FIFA games.
Volta, yeah.
It's not close to it, it's still not really that good, but at least they're trying,
Well, so here's the thing with Volta in particular, and this is one of the things. I mean, obviously we're going into Madden and FIFA, but I do want to finish out with NBA Live before we leave. I think when we talk about Volta, like, and all these new features, like Face of the Franchise is the same thing last year
Mhm.
with Madden, where it's like, yeah, we're pumped for this feature, and then it comes out, and you're just like, halfway through, you're like,
It wasn't
whatever.
yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't what I wanted it to be.
and
It's
that's why I've advocated for them to just be like, dude, just fix the features. Like Madden, fix the blocking.
yeah.
Like fix the block. Like, and for you, fix the pace. If you make minor changes, yeah, big changes make people buy the game and all that stuff. But the hardcores are going to be there, and people are going to buy it either way. So you might as well just focus on actual core issues with the game. And I know FIFA career mode this year was terrible.
Yeah, that's something you and me have talked about actually. You mentioned to me like the players whatever complaining about playing time. It's terrible. The actual gameplay, I think you're right, sometimes just needs to be tweaked a little bit instead of coming out with these brand new things that we usually use for a little bit and then are like it's not even what I expected anyway. Like you
Yeah.
said, like I said with the, like I'll get some guy who's 60 overall on like my practice squad and he's like, I need to play more. And I'm like, you're never playing. Like it's not happening. Like what even is this?
And then you can't get transfers because like the transfer system is broken and all this
Yeah.
garbage. Yeah.
Some of the actual gameplay, yeah, is
Yeah.
pretty poor.
And then with NBA Live this generation, I mean, it's sad for me, man, because I'm not the biggest 2K guy, man. Like I lost the lust for 2K, and then Live, like I'm this is stupid, but this is what Live is. Live is everything is great but the gameplay. Like legit, the gameplay is average. It's still fun to play with like other people online or whatever, but at the same token, like it's just the gameplay, the everything else is great. Like the one is great. They can only improve on that. And like it's nice that it's not pay to win like 2K. But if
Yeah.
the gameplay was better, I think more people would have switched to live by now. And it's only just now, towards the end of the generation, gotten better. And obviously, they keep canceling it, and who knows if we're even going to get it back. I just think if we lose NBA Live in the next generation, it would be pretty tough because it felt like they were actually getting back to some type of competitiveness, and it probably would have happened in this generation if they don't come out with another game.
Yeah, I mean, I've only played a handful of live. I mean,
It's
I
pretty cheap,
I
by the
played
way, so
oh
I would recommend getting because it's cheap.
I've played like 07, 08, and then just recently, a couple years ago, you tried to get me into it again. You're like, hey, play live a little bit. You might like it because I had my beef with 2K.
Yeah.
2K had problems. Um, so I don't really know too much about live. I do know, like you said, 2K, like a lot of games is now like you basically have to pay to, get the advancement that you want. So it's
Yeah.
a little bit frustrating. Um, but yeah, I just think that there's such a big, like, for some reason following around 2K, just not many people are willing to like step out of
Yeah.
the realm of it. Speaking of 2K though, did you see who their cover athlete is?
Yeah, the current gen, there's 3 cover athletes. The
Mm-hmm.
current gen cover is Damian Lillard, and that trailer was bizarre. What
Yeah.
was that?
How do
What
you how
was
do you
that?
feel about Dame though? I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of a reach. I think Dame's a really nice player, but like,
He was on the cover of NBA Live 15 as well.
yeah, that's
And he
fair.
was like, I made it. I'm like, dude, you made a video game cover like 5 years ago. Are we just forgetting that you were on that cover? And by the way, Live 15 was a fun game. I played a good chunk of it.
I
But
think that's the one you got me into.
no, I think it got you into like 18 or something. By the way, I would highly recommend getting Live because it's quite cheap from what I remember.
Is
It's
it?
not that expensive like the newer games. They always dip the price, so it's honestly worth getting if it's like $5 to $10. I got this one this year for like $10, and it's worth $10. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But either way, like Dame, like I'm cool with it. I'm good with him being the cover athlete. I mean, what choices do they really have with the season not being over? But I'm happy with him being the cover athlete.
Should have put Kawhi. I think would have been the guy for this
I
year.
don't know.
But then
I'm
you're gonna have Kobe for the Legendary Edition. Obviously,
yeah.
you gotta pay respect to that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
For sure. I wonder what the next gen. Well, actually, we kind of already know who the next gen cover athlete's going to be. It's going to be Zion. Like, let's not even kid ourselves because he's kind of been their promotional guy for the last 2 years. It probably will be Zion, and the legend will be Kobe.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah.
But one last thing before we go, then I want to get, what is your all time favorite game on what console? Like, what is
Oh,
a sports
jeez.
game? Let's go sports game since we're
Oh my God. There's so many. All time. My God, that's hard, man. I have no clue. I really have zero. I really have zero clue. Now I have like specific, like in terms of actual sports games, it's hard because I don't get the games every year anymore as I used to. I just don't. So I mean, I love Madden 20 this year. I thought it was great. I mean, Ultimate Team now EA's done an amazing job with because it's not necessarily a pay to win model. You can still get a solid team. Like I think I'm going to finish generation with like a 96 overall, so you can still get a solid team. But I think that I don't know in terms of all time. I think you probably. I mean, for me, I love the old Forza Horizon games more than anything. Probably
Oh yeah.
those are the games that I probably got the most joy out of playing and spending
Yeah.
time on.
I think
Like,
Forza is kind of a lost game, isn't it?
well, not really. I mean, I never liked the Motorsport series. I've played it before. I've never enjoyed it. But like Forza Horizon, like the first one, I've
Hmm.
been meaning to go back and play it over again. The first
Yeah.
game, because it's in if you have an Xbox One, you can actually get it and play it on Xbox One. It's probably one of my favorite games of all time, just because it never really got stale for me, unlike all these other, Madden, FIFA, NHL, whatever. Like, it never got stale for me ever. And
Yeah.
at times I would get too frustrated and stop playing for a few months, but I still would enjoy the game. And so for those like open world kind of racing games, I truly enjoy those. And I think I get the best experience out of them. But it's always also these abnormal games. Like, I know Star Wars Battlefront 2 was also pretty hated on at the beginning, but now that game's just awesome. that game now, towards basically the tail end of its life cycle, is amazing, and they really made some significant changes to that game. So credit to EA for that.
Yeah, I saw you online playing some Battlefront yesterday.
Yeah. But what for you, like sports game or just all time games that really resonate with you?
For me, it's if I had to pick one game that I don't think I ever got bored of, it was probably I think it's 2013 with LeBron 2K. Like
Yeah.
that to me was
2K14, yeah.
yeah 2K14 was one that I loved. I mean, LeBron was a cheat code in that game,
I
but
still play that game. I do rebuilds on that game.
yeah, that was a really good 2K. Another one for me is probably Madden 05 with Donovan McNabb on the cover.
Ooh,
That
not
was,
04. I played 04. That's when I first got my start.
that was a good one. And then, like I mentioned before, probably like it was. I think it's 02 FIFA or something. That was like my first like dive though into like sports video games.
Yeah.
It was at the Boys and Girls Club, and it was like FIFA, yeah, 02 on the Xbox, and I was like, oh wow, this is cool.
Yeah, no, I grew up, I had this, I wonder if I still have the box. I probably still have the box somewhere, but for Christmas, I got this huge set of every 2004 EA Sports game. Like NHL '04 is
Oh
one of my favorite
yeah,
games ever.
I
I
have one
still
of the,
want to find that game
I
for
have
like
one of those
GameCube or
too.
something.
I have the 2000 one of those where it's
Yeah.
like the whole pack. You get the Madden.
NASCAR Thunder and all that stuff. I
Yeah,
got NASCAR
yeah.
Thunder 03. That game
NASCAR
was fun.
Thunder. That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a great game. And then I don't know, Madden '04. I never really got big in Michael Vick on '04 because I was so
Yeah.
young. But NHL '04 is still one of my favorites. That's a game I've been trying to find. Like I want to go and actually physically go and find that game and buy it. And then like speaking of NHL games as well, NHL 2K10 on the Wii is great. Or like actually that whole game on 360 is amazing too. But yeah. Any other games that you actually want to find from your childhood that you remember playing?
Ooh. I know I have a copy of it somewhere that I really want to get out and play, but I think it's 2K5 with Ben Wallace on the cover.
Oh my
That's one
god.
I remember playing for hours on end, and I just want to see how bad it really was. You know what I mean? I know it's gonna be bad, but like I just remember playing that. Oh, the old when they used to make 2K baseball. I used to
Oh
love that.
yeah.
There's one with Derek Jeter on the cover. I think it is 2K5 also.
Yeah.
And it has Derek Jeter on the cover. That's one also that I found in like my garage like 3 years ago, and I remember getting it out and actually playing and enjoying it. Like I was like, wow, this is still good. Like this
Yeah.
is.
I'd also recommend MVP baseball
I
for
never
ES.
played that
I
one.
never played MVP, but I heard it's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The old
Have you ever played PES, the soccer?
Oh, I played. I had the demo for the one they made this year, actually, this year or last year. Playing online on that game's quite fun.
Is it? I
It
never
is.
played that.
It's quite fun. I would recommend getting the demo because you can actually play online and it's like stupid fun.
Yeah.
The controls are weird, but PES has definitely improved over the years.
Mhm.
All right, we're gonna head out. Sorry for a bit of a longer pod than normal. A good discussion on video games and stuff. Really great idea, man.
Yeah.
Really awesome. Really fun
I
to kind of
figured
change the
I
pace.
figured we got a little extra time, with kind of the delay in sports, so might as well touch on some old topics and yeah, a good pop culture segment.
Definitely, we have a lot of opinions on video games. That's for sure. Um, but yeah, I'll be back. I think tomorrow we're recording with Shane and Brandon, so I'll be back there tomorrow. We'll cover some of the players that are not playing in all of the sports that are restarting, and I think we're doing the AFC North as well, and we're going to do some Patriots news. There were a lot of Patriots news this week, so I'll see you tomorrow. See you next week. Have a great 4th of July, man. Enjoy a good long weekend, and I'll see you next week, man.
Yeah, man, have a good fourth. Good luck on the show tomorrow. Thanks for having me as always. I always appreciate being on the show, and thanks for helping me lay out some of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely a fun time. All right, see you guys. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow. And